The graduation ceremony had just concluded, the young Grant's enhancement lights still pulsing with excitement as they gathered in Am's private study. The room was lined with rare artifacts from countless trading expeditions, holographic star charts, exotic minerals, and preserved cultural items from dozens of species. Most prized among them, a small shelf of Earth items, carefully curated. "Teacher began Telix, her ocular implants gleaming with ambition, "we've come to present our graduation initiative." Settled into his ergonomic hover chair designed specifically for extended trade negotiations. His own cybernetics whirred softly as he studied his former students, now full Grent traders, eager to make their mark on the galactic economy. "I'm listening," he said, gesturing for them to continue. Jorvis, whose computational enhancements were known to be the most advanced in the class, activated a holographic display in the center of the room. It showed a detailed map of former Droo territory, vast swathes of abandoned space, dead worlds, and dormant trade routes. "The Droo expanse," Jorvis said, his voice modulated to convey confidence and clarity. "Trillions in untapped resources, hundreds of habitable worlds, strategic positioning between 3 major galactic arms, and completely avoided by all major trading houses," noted, his tone cautious. "For good reason." "Precisely why it presents such an opportunity," continued Sella, the group's diplomatic specialist. Her vocal enhancements could shift to match the auditory preferences of a dozen different species. "We propose establishing a Grent-led free trade corridor through the heart of former Droo space." Am's enhancement lights flickered, the Grent equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "Bold, very bold, but the political implications alone—" "We've run the simulations," Telix interjected, her excitement evident. "Even with conservative estimates, we project a 3,200% return on investment within a standard decade. The corridor would connect previously isolated markets, cut transit times between the Orion and Perseus arms by 43%, and open access to resources that have remained untouched since the extinction." Leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite his reservations. "And what of the ghosts, both literal and economic?" The young Grent exchanged glances. It was Manti, the quietest of the group but known for her historical expertise, who answered. "The memory of the Droo still haunts the galactic consciousness," she acknowledged, her voice solemn, "but it has been 87 standard years since their extinction. Most species have moved beyond fear into curiosity. Our market research indicates that 68% of major trading entities would utilize a secure corridor through the expanse, if it existed." Rose from his chair and moved to gaze out the view beyond. The bustling Grent trading hub pulsed with activity. Ships from 100 worlds loading and unloading cargo, negotiators finalizing deals, value being created and exchanged in an endless dance of commerce. "You know," he said finally, "there's a reason no one has attempted this before. The humans still maintain periodic patrols through that space, and certain factions within the Galactic Council have worked very hard to ensure the Droo remain nothing but a cautionary tale." "With respect, teacher," said Jorvis, "those same factions have significant financial interests in maintaining the current inefficient trade routes. The status quo benefits them at the expense of galactic prosperity." Turned, his expression unreadable. "You were always my most ambitious student, but remember the 6th lesson from our study of the Droo. The consequences of our actions can be far-reaching." He paused. "What exactly are you asking of me?" Talek stepped forward. "Your endorsement, Teacher Your name still carries significant weight with the Grent Trading Council. With your support, we can secure the initial funding and diplomatic clearances." For a long moment, Ame was silent, his enhancement lights cycling through patterns as he processed the proposal. "I will not endorse this," he said finally, and the young Grent's lights dimmed in disappointment. "Not yet. First, you will conduct a preliminary survey expedition, one system only, assess the true conditions, document the resources, evaluate the risks. If, and only if, you return with data supporting your projections, then I will consider lending my name to your initiative." The young Grant's enhancement lights brightened once more. "Which system?" asked Sella eagerly. Returned to the holographic display and zoomed in on a small, unremarkable star near the former border of Droo space. "This one. Minimal strategic importance, but representative of what you'll find throughout the expanse. A good test case." His voice took on the tone he had used in countless negotiations. "Those are my terms. Take them, or seek another sponsor." The young Grent conferred briefly among themselves, their implants communicating privately. "We accept," Clarke said, "and we'll need a ship." Am's facial implants shifted into what humans would recognize as a smile. "Already arranged. The profitable venture is being prepared as we speak. I may be cautious, but I'm not blind to opportunity." As his former students filed out, buzzing with excitement and plans, turned back to the viewport. His expression grew distant, troubled. "Be careful what you unearth," he murmured to the empty room. "Some investments carry costs that no balance sheet can capture." The profitable venture dropped out of FTL at the edge of the target system, its sensors immediately beginning a comprehensive scan. On the bridge, the young Grent traders watched as data streamed across their displays. "Initial readings show no signs of active technology," reported Jorvis, his cybernetic interfaces directly connected to the ship's systems. 3 planets, an asteroid belt, and interesting. The second planet shows terraforming markers. "Droo terraforming?" asked Telex, who had naturally assumed the position of expedition leader. "Consistent with known Droo environmental engineering, yes," Jorvis confirmed. "The atmosphere would have been breathable for them, though slightly toxic to us without filtration." Sella, monitoring communications, frowned. "I'm picking up something unusual. Not a distress signal, but a beacon? Very low power, automated. It's coming from the 3rd planet." "A trap?" Manthe suggested, her historical databases already searching for precedents. "Unlikely after so many decades," said Telex, "but we proceed with caution. Jorvis, set a course for the 3rd planet. Standard approach, full defensive systems online." As the profitable venture moved deeper into the system, the young Grent continued their analysis. The first planet was a barren rock, rich in heavy metals but otherwise unremarkable. The asteroid belt showed evidence of previous mining operations, long abandoned. It was the second planet that first hinted at the system's secrets. From orbit they could see the remnants of a small Droo colony. Buildings reclaimed by native vegetation, landing pads cracked and overgrown, but the unmistakable geometric precision of the Droo's architectural style still visible. "Download those patterns," instructed Telex. "Architectural firms across the galaxy would pay well for unique historical designs." "Already cataloging," Manthe confirmed, her enhancements capturing every detail. "And I'm detecting something else. The terraforming wasn't just to make the planet habitable. They were conducting agricultural experiments. These plant formations aren't random." "Export potential?" asked Sella, always thinking of markets. "Unknown without samples," Manthe replied, "but noted for the survey." The ship continued to the 3rd planet. Smaller, rocky, with a thin atmosphere. As they approached, the beacon signal grew stronger. "I've decrypted it," Sella announced suddenly. It's a Droo archive marker, similar to our own knowledge repositories." The bridge fell silent. A Droo archive would be invaluable. Technology, cultural artifacts, historical records. The academic and museum markets alone would generate incalculable profits. "Prepare a survey team," Telex ordered. "Environmental suits, full-spectrum scanners, and defensive measures. We don't know what automated systems might still be active." Hours later, the team stood in a vast underground chamber, their suit lights illuminating what appeared to be a data storage facility. Rows of crystalline memory matrices lined the walls, their alien architecture both beautiful and forbidding. "Can we access it?" Telex asked, her voice hushed despite the privacy of their comms. Jorvis approached one of the control interfaces. Their technology was advanced but not incomprehensible. With our translation algorithms, he began interfacing his cybernetics with the alien system. "Be careful," warned Manti. "Remember the history lessons. The Droo were known for booby traps and dead man switches." "Accounting for that," Jorvis assured her, his enhancement lights flickering rapidly as he processed the alien code structures. "I'm creating a read-only connection. We observe, but don't alter." Gradually, the facility came to life around them. Lights activated, holographic interfaces shimmered into existence, and a low hum permeated the chamber. "I'm in," Jorvis announced. "The system is organizing the data for us. It recognizes our query patterns, if not our specific species." "What have we found?" Telex asked, moving closer. "Everything," Jorvis breathed, his enhancement lights pulsing with excitement. "Cultural records, technological schematics, astronomical surveys, biological research. This wasn't just an archive, it was a complete backup of Droo civilization." Sela joined them at the interface. "The profit potential is staggering. We could parcel this out over decades. Universities, museums, tech firms, cultural preservationists." "Hold," Manti said sharply, her historical algorithms flagging something. "Jorvis, go back to that last data set, the one labeled with the Droo symbol for continuity." Jorvis navigated back to the indicated section. As the data resolved into readable form, the young Grent fell silent once more, this time in shock. That's not possible," Sela whispered. The records were clear. A small population of Droo, fewer than 10,000, had escaped the human extermination campaign. They had fled to a remote system beyond the galaxy's edge, establishing a hidden colony with technology designed to mask their presence from detection. "They survived," Telex said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. "The Droo aren't extinct." "This changes everything," Mantley said quietly. "If the humans learned of this, they'd finish what they started," Sela concluded grimly, "and the war would begin anew." Jorvis stepped back from the interface. The galactic economy couldn't survive another Droo-human conflict. Markets would collapse overnight. The four young Grents stood in silence, the weight of their discovery bearing down on them. Finally, Telex spoke. "We came seeking profit," she said slowly. "Instead, we've found something far more volatile, knowledge that could destabilize the entire galaxy." "What do we do?" asked Sela. "Report this to the Galactic Council? To Telex's enhancement lights cycled through decision-making patterns. "For now, we say nothing about the survivors. We take the rest, the resources, the technology, the cultural artifacts. Those align with our original proposal. But the existence of living Droo, that must remain our secret, at least until we determine the wisest course of action." "Suppressing information goes against everything we were taught," Manthi objected. "So does triggering a war that would destroy trillions in market value," Jorvis countered. "Think of the sixth lesson. The consequences of our actions can be far-reaching." Telex nodded. "We need time to consider the implications. For now, we complete our survey as planned. We document the resources, the technology, everything that would make the trade corridor viable. But we partition this data," she gestured to the survival records, "until we can consult with privately." One by one, the others agreed. Their enhancement lights synchronized in the Grent gesture of consensus. "For the good of galactic trade," they recited in unison, the ancient Grent motto that had guided their people for millennia. As they prepared to return to their ship, Manthi lingered, her historical databases still processing the implications. "We came looking for opportunity," she murmured. "We may have found our judgment day instead." Am's private study was sealed, all recording devices deactivated, all communication systems offline. His former students stood before him, their enhancement lights muted with tension as he absorbed the full implications of their discovery. "Living Droo," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "After all this time, a small population," Telex clarified, "hidden beyond the galaxy's edge. The coordinates are encrypted in the archive, but we didn't access them. We thought it safer that way." Am rose and paced the room, his cybernetic legs moving silently across the polished floor. "You were right to bring this to me privately. The implications are staggering." "The question is what to do now," said Sella. "Our original proposal for the trade corridor is sound. The resources alone would revolutionize multiple market sectors. But the archive complicates matters," Manti added. "Even without the survival data, the cultural and technological information it contains would be politically explosive." Stopped his pacing and turned to face them. "Tell me, what does your Grent training suggest you should do?" The four exchanged glances. It was Jorvis who spoke first. "Maximum profit would come from selective disclosure," he analyzed. "We reveal the resources, some of the technology, perhaps curated cultural artifacts. Enough to justify the trade corridor, but nothing that would inflame human sentiment or trigger political instability." "And the survivors?" Pressed. "Remain unknown," Sella said firmly. "The risk assessment is clear. If humans learned of living Droo, they would likely pursue extinction to completion. The resulting conflict would devastate galactic markets for generations." Enhancement lights cycled through contemplative patterns. "So you propose to withhold critical information for profit. How does this align with the lessons of ethical trading?" Telex stepped forward. "With respect, teacher, we see it differently. We're not withholding information just for profit. We're preventing a catastrophic war. Yes, we stand to gain financially, but so would countless others across the galaxy. The trade corridor would benefit millions of worlds." "And what of the Droo themselves?" Asked quietly. "Do they not deserve a voice in this decision?" This question silenced the young traders. Finally, Manti spoke. "Historical precedent suggests contact would be dangerous for them and for us. The humans monitor all long-range communications to the galactic rim. Any attempt to reach the Droo survivors would risk exposing them." Nodded slowly. "A logical analysis. Now let me pose another question. What if someone else discovers what you have found? What if the humans eventually detect the Droo colony on their own? By then perhaps tensions will have eased," suggested Sella, though her tone lacked conviction. "Cultural exchange through our trade corridor could gradually rehabilitate the Droo's historical image, make them seem less monstrous." "A thin hope," observed, "and one that places the entire Grent trading position at risk. If it were discovered that we knew and concealed this information, our reputation for honest dealing would be destroyed. No species would trust us again." The four young Grent fell silent, their enhancement lights dimming as they processed this uncomfortable truth. "Yet the alternative seems equally unacceptable," Telex said finally. "Do we simply report the existence of Droo survivors and watch as humans launch another extinction campaign? Do we trigger the very war we hope to prevent?" Returned to his chair, his enhancement lights now pulsing in the pattern that his students recognized from their most challenging ethical lessons. "You face what humans call a moral dilemma," he said. "A situation where all available options seem to violate some ethical principle. In such cases, we must seek not the perfect solution, but the one that best balances competing values." He activated his own holographic display, bringing up the map of the former Droo territories. "Your trade corridor has merit," he acknowledged. "The economic benefits would be substantial. But it cannot be built on a foundation of such dangerous secrets." "What do you suggest, teacher?" asked Telex. Enhancement lights settled into a resolved pattern. "A third path. We will proceed with the Trade Corridor Initiative, focusing initially on resource development and safe archaeological recovery. Meanwhile, I will activate my oldest and most trusted network, traders who operated during the war, who maintained connections with both humans and Droo." "To what end?" Jorvis asked. "To lay groundwork," explained, "not for immediate disclosure, but for eventual reconciliation. We will work through intermediaries, through cultural exchanges, through careful narrative management. We will aim to gradually shift perceptions of the Droo from monsters to a complex civilization that made tragic mistakes." "That could take decades," Sala observed. "Good trading requires patience," reminded her. "And in the meantime, your trade corridor will flourish, building economic interdependencies that would make renewed conflict too costly for all parties. "And the survivors?" Manthe asked. "Do we contact them?" "Not yet," decided. "Their existence remains our most closely guarded secret, but we will prepare for the day when contact becomes possible, when the galaxy is ready for their return." Telex considered this plan, her analytical enhancements evaluating its probability of success. "It's risky. Many variables, many potential points of failure. All worthwhile ventures involve risk," reminded her. "But consider the potential returns, not just profit, but the preservation of a species, the prevention of war, the establishment of new markets and cultural exchanges. Is that not worth the effort?" The young Grent conferred briefly among themselves, their implants communicating privately, as they had done when first presenting their proposal. Finally, they turned back to their teacher. "We are in agreement," Telex announced. "We will proceed with your approach. The trade corridor will be our public focus, while we quietly work toward a future where the truth can be safely revealed." Am's facial implants shifted into his characteristic smile. "Then let us begin the real work. You came to me seeking endorsement for a trade initiative. Instead, you have embarked on something far more significant, a multi-generational project to reshape galactic history." As his former students left to begin preparation of their formal proposal to the Grent Trading Council, Am turned once more to the viewport. Beyond, the endless dance of commerce continued, ships coming and going, value being created and exchanged. "For the good of galactic trade," he murmured, "and for something more." The Great Hall of Trade hummed with activity as Grent from across the galaxy gathered for the formal presentation. The Trading Council members sat elevated on their traditional hovering platforms, their ancient cybernetic enhancements gleaming with the patina of centuries. In the center of the hall stood Telex, Jorvis, Sella, and Manthe, their own enhancements polished to perfection for this crucial moment. Behind them, Am watched proudly from the mentor's position. "Esteemed members of the Trading Council," Telex began, her voice modulated to carry perfectly throughout the vast chamber. "We present for your consideration the Grent Initiative for the Revitalization of the Eastern Expanse." The formal name had been carefully chosen, no mention of the Droo, no hint of the true scope of their ambitions. A holographic display activated, showing the proposed trade corridor in glowing blue against the darkness of the former Droo territories. "Our preliminary survey has confirmed what our projections suggested," Telex continued. "The Eastern Expanse contains vast resources lying fallow, minerals, habitable worlds, stellar phenomena of scientific interest, and archaeological sites of historical significance." Jorvis stepped forward. "The initial phase would establish 3 trading hubs at strategic points along the corridor." The hologram zoomed in to show the proposed locations. "Each positioned to maximize logistical efficiency while minimizing security concerns." "Security concerns?" inquired one of the council members, her enhancement lights pulsing with skepticism. "You mean the humans?" "We have taken human sensitivities into account," Sella assured her, stepping forward. "Our diplomatic assessment indicates that a purely commercial initiative focused on resource development rather than territorial claims would not trigger human opposition. Indeed, our projections suggest they would become major users of the corridor within 5 standard years." Another council member leaned forward. "And what of the historical contamination? The Droo were not merely defeated, they were erased. Their worlds were sterilized. Is it safe to operate in such environments?" This was where Manthe's expertise came into play. "Our survey confirmed that radiation levels have declined to acceptable parameters in 87% of the expanse. The remaining areas would be clearly marked and avoided. As for biological agents, the human cleansing was thorough. We detected no trace of Droo biological material in any of our sampling sites." This last statement was technically true. They had found no biological material in their sampling sites. The archive had been carefully excluded from those official records. Questions continued for hours as the council probed every aspect of the proposal: financial projections, security arrangements, diplomatic implications, technological requirements. The young Grent had prepared thoroughly for each topic. Finally, the council's eldest, a Grent so ancient that most of her original body had been replaced with cybernetics, raised her hand for silence. "Ambitious," she declared, her voice carrying the metallic timbre of age. "Perhaps too ambitious. The profit potential is clear, but so are the risks." Her ancient eyes turned to "You have sponsored these young traders, You who witnessed the fall of the Droo Empire firsthand. Do you truly believe this initiative is sound?" Stepped forward to stand beside his former students. "Honored eldest, esteemed council, I have reviewed every aspect of this proposal. I have verified their survey data personally, and yes, I endorse it without reservation." A murmur ran through the assembled Grent. "The past cannot be changed," continued, "but the future remains open to profitable investment. The Eastern Expanse has remained untouched for too long, a vast market opportunity left unrealized due to fear and painful memories. It is time for the Grent to demonstrate once again why we are the galaxy's preeminent traders, because we see opportunity where others see only risk." The eldest's enhancement lights cycled through deliberative patterns for what seemed an eternity. Finally, she spoke. "The initiative is approved for Phase 1 implementation. Funding will be allocated according to the standard venture formula. Progress reports will be required quarterly." Her ancient eyes narrowed. "Do not disappoint the council." As the assembly dispersed, Telex and her companions could barely contain their excitement, their enhancement lights pulsing rapidly despite their attempts at professional restraint. "Phase 1 approval," Jorvis whispered. "Everything we hoped for." "It's just the beginning," Telex reminded him. "The real work starts now." Guided them toward a private chamber where they could speak freely. Once sealed inside, their composure broke, and the young Grent allowed their enhancement lights to flash in celebration. "Well done," commended them. "A flawless presentation." "We've spent months preparing," Sella admitted. "Every possible question, every objection, we've rehearsed it all." "And now we have one standard year to establish the first trading hub," Manthe noted. "It will be a Herculean effort, made more complex by our secondary objective," Telex added, her voice lowering despite the room's privacy shields. Nodded gravely. "Indeed. Even as you build the visible infrastructure of the trade corridor, we must begin the invisible work of preparing for eventual disclosure." "Have you made progress with your network?" Jorvis asked. "Some," acknowledged. "I've re-established contact with several key figures from the war era, traders who maintain connections with both humans and Droo, diplomats who attempted to broker peace before the final extermination began. Many are retired now, but their influence remains." "And their reaction to our discovery?" Telex inquired. Enhancement lights pulsed with caution. "Mixed. Some see the potential for healing an ancient wound. Others fear reopening it would only lead to more bloodshed. All agree that immediate disclosure would be catastrophic." "So we proceed as planned," Sella concluded. "The trade corridor moves forward openly while the reconciliation project develops in the shadows." "And what of the archive?" Manthe asked. "The knowledge it contains could revolutionize dozens of technical fields, to say nothing of its cultural and historical value." "We will begin controlled extraction," decided. "Technical knowledge that can be plausibly attributed to archaeological recovery. Cultural artifacts that pose no political risk. Each release, carefully timed and contextually framed to gradually reshape the narrative around Droo's civilization." Telex enhancement light cycled through analytical patterns. "A multi-generational project indeed. We may not live to see its completion." "The longest journeys begin with a single trading contract," reminded her, quoting an ancient Grent proverb. "For now, focus on making Phase 1 a success. Establish that first hub. Begin resource extraction, prove the economic viability of the corridor, build a foundation strong enough to support the weight of the truth when the time comes to reveal it." The young Grent synchronized their enhancement lights in affirmation. "For the good of galactic trade," they recited together, "and for something more." As they departed to begin implementation, remained behind, his ancient eyes turned inward to memories of a war that had changed the course of galactic history. "May your trading be more successful than my warnings were," he murmured to the ghosts of the past. "For all our sakes." One standard year later, the first hub of the trade corridor gleamed against the darkness of space, a marvel of Grent engineering and commercial optimism. Shaped like a vast metal flower, its central core housed administrative functions while its petals served as docking bays, warehouses, and trading floors. Already, ships from 24 species arrived daily, bringing goods and departing with the first harvests from the expanse's abundant resources. In her office atop the central spire, Telex reviewed the quarterly projections with satisfaction. Her enhancement lights pulsed with the calm rhythm of profitable returns. "We're exceeding Phase 1 targets by 22%, she noted as Jorvis entered the room. "The council will be pleased." "They should be," Jorvis agreed, his own enhancements interfacing with the station's systems to update his data. "Resource extraction is proceeding efficiently, and we've already had inquiries about Phase 2 expansion from 17 major trading houses." Telex's satisfaction dimmed slightly. "And our other project?" Jorvis activated the room's privacy shields before responding. "Moving more slowly, but reports progress. His network has begun introducing carefully curated Droo cultural artifacts into academic circles. The narrative emphasis is on their artistic achievements and philosophical complexity rather than their military aggression." "Human response?" "Cautiously curious," Jorvis reported. "No signs of renewed hostility yet, but it's early days." Telex nodded, turning to gaze out at the docking bays where ships of all designs were busy loading and unloading cargo. "Where are Sella and Manthe? I expected them back from the survey expedition yesterday." Jorvis began, but was interrupted by his communication implant. "Speaking of which, they've just docked, and they're requesting an immediate secure meeting." Telex's enhancement lights flickered with concern. "Here, as soon as they've cleared quarantine." 30 minutes later, Sella and Manthe entered Telex's office, their enhancement lights pulsing with an urgency that immediately set Telex on alert. "Secure the room," Sella ordered without preamble. "Maximum privacy protocols." As Jorvis complied, Manthe removed a data crystal from her personal storage compartment. "We found something that wasn't in the archive, something that changes everything." Telex's enhancement lights cycled through caution patterns. "Explain." "We were surveying Sector 7 Gamma, cataloging mineral deposits," Sella began. "Standard procedure, but we detected an energy signature beneath the surface of the fourth planet. Faint, but definitely artificial." "Droo technology?" asked Jorvis. "That's what we assumed," Manthe continued. "We expected another archive, perhaps. What we found was something else entirely." She inserted the crystal into Telex's system. A holographic image appeared. A vast underground facility, clearly of Droo design, but unlike anything they had seen before. "This facility wasn't built to preserve information," Sella explained, her voice hushed despite the privacy shields. "It was designed to preserve Droo." "A survival bunker?" Telex asked, her enhancement lights pulsing rapidly. "More than that," Manthe said. "It's a Genesis vault, containing genetic samples from thousands of Droo individuals, embryonic storage units, automated incubation systems, everything needed to rebuild a population from scratch." The office fell silent as the implications sank in. "Is it active?" Jorvis finally asked. "Dormant," Sella replied, "but intact. The systems are in stasis, waiting for activation codes that never came. The Droo who fled beyond the galaxy's edge weren't the only survival contingency. This was their backup plan, a way to ensure their species could be reborn, even if all other populations were destroyed." Telex's enhancement light cycled through decision-making patterns. "Does anyone else know about this?" "No one," Manthe assured her. "We maintained communication silence during the entire investigation. All data is on this crystal only, nothing in the main systems." "Good," Telex said. "This must remain absolutely confidential. Not even can know yet." This declaration surprised the others, their enhancement lights flickering in astonishment. "Not tell Jarvis questioned. "He's been our guide through all of this. Why withhold this discovery?" Telex rose and paced the office, her cybernetic movements betraying her agitation despite her controlled voice. "Because this is no longer just about disclosure or reconciliation," she explained. "This is about resurrection. The power to bring back an extinct species. A species that humans deliberately wiped out. The political implications are orders of magnitude more volatile than simply revealing that some Droo survived." "She's right," Sella realized. "This isn't just about the past anymore. It's about the future, about who has the right to decide whether the Droo can reclaim their place in the galaxy." Mansi's historical databases were already processing precedents. "There is no historical parallel for this situation. No ethical framework specifically designed for the resurrection of an intentionally exterminated intelligent species, which means we need to create one," Telex decided. "Before we involve or anyone else, we need to develop a comprehensive analysis of all implications, ethical, political, economic, and practical." "And if our analysis suggests resurrection is too dangerous?" Jarvis asked quietly. The question hung in the air, weighty with moral gravity. "Then we face another dilemma," Telex acknowledged. "Whether we have the right to prevent it, whether non-interference is itself a moral choice with consequences we must bear." Chella's diplomatic enhancements were calculating political scenarios. The humans would see resurrection as a direct challenge to their previous decision, a nullification of their victory. Many would demand immediate military action, while others might see it as an opportunity for atonement, Manthi countered. "Human ethical thinking has evolved over the generations. Some might welcome the chance to rectify what many now view as a historical atrocity." "Speculation," Jarvis noted. "We need data. We need to understand human thinking on this specific issue before we can proceed." Telex's enhancement lights settled into a resolved pattern. "Agreed. Here's what we do. First, we secure this facility. Sella, arrange for a research outpost to be established on that planet, ostensibly for mineral extraction. Staff it with our most trusted associates. Second, we begin targeted information gathering. Manthi, leverage your historical databases and academic connections. Create a theoretical paper on the ethics of xenospecies resurrection. Nothing specifically about the Droo, but exploring the concept generally. Let's see how academics respond. Third, Jarvis, develop security protocols for the Genesis Vault that exceed anything we've implemented before. If this information leaks prematurely, the consequences could be catastrophic." "And you?" Sella asked. "I will focus on the trade corridor's expansion," Telex replied. "Phase 2 needs to proceed flawlessly. We need to build economic interdependency so robust that conflict becomes unthinkable no matter what is eventually revealed." The four synchronized their enhancement lights in agreement. "One more thing," Telex added. "We will tell but not yet. Let's gather preliminary data first, develop initial ethical frameworks, then we'll bring him in. His experience will be invaluable, but I want us to approach him with more than just a problem. I want us to present possible solutions as well." "How long?" Manthi asked. "One standard quarter," Telex decided. "Then we reassess based on what we've learned." As her colleagues left to begin their assigned tasks, Telex turned back to the holographic image of the Genesis Vault. Its alien architecture, both beautiful and ominous, seemed to pulse with potential and danger in equal measure. "What would you do?" she whispered to the empty room. "If you could begin again, would you choose a different path?" The Droo facility offered no answer, only the silent promise of decisions yet to be made. The standard quarter passed more quickly than any of them had anticipated. The trade corridor's Phase 2 expansion proceeded ahead of schedule, with 3 additional hubs under construction and resource extraction exceeding projections by a substantial margin. The Grent Trading Council had elevated the initiative to priority status, allocating additional resources and diplomatic support. On the surface, everything was proceeding perfectly. Beneath that surface, complexities multiplied. Telex sat at the head of the conference table in her private strategy room, reviewing the reports her colleagues had compiled. Jorvis had secured the Genesis vault with layers of protection so sophisticated that not even the station's security systems knew of its existence. Sela had established the research outpost, staffed with specialists who believed they were analyzing unique mineral formations. And Manthi, "Your academic paper caused quite a stir," Telex noted, reviewing the data. 17 formal responses already, and discussion threads across multiple species scholarly networks. Manth's enhancement lights pulsed with scholarly pride. "The response has been illuminating. I kept the scenario theoretical, a hypothetical extinct species with no reference to the Droo, but the ethical frameworks that emerged were remarkably consistent across species boundaries." "Summarize?" Jorvis requested. "3 primary ethical positions have emerged," Manthi explained, her academic enhancements organizing the information. "The preservationist view holds that extinct species have an inherent right to existence if restoration is possible. The consequentialist view focuses on the potential benefits or harms of resurrection. And the sovereigntist view contends that the decision belongs to whoever caused the extinction in the first place." "Let me guess which view the human scholars favored," Sela said dryly. "Actually, human responses were split," Manthi countered. "Some advocated strongly for preservationist ethics, arguing that the ability to restore implies a moral obligation to do so. Others did indeed favor sovereigntist approaches, but often with nuanced caveats about historical context and evolving ethical standards." Telex leaned forward. "And what of the practical considerations? Beyond the ethics, what do your projections show about how various species would react to a Droo resurrection?" Manthi's enhancement lights cycled through analytical patterns. "Mixed, as one would expect. Younger species with no direct memory of the Droo-human war trend toward curiosity and cautious optimism. Longer-lived species who experience the conflict firsthand remain deeply wary, and human," she paused, her historical databases complying the most current assessment. "Human reaction would be the most unpredictable," she finally continued. "Their species has undergone significant cultural evolution since the war. Many now view the complete extinction of the Droo as a historical atrocity, a stain on their collective conscience. Others maintain that it was a necessary action against an implacable foe." "Political factions," Jorvis inquired, "would split along predictable lines," Sela interjected, her diplomatic enhancements synthesizing the data. "Human expansionists would likely view Droo resurrection as a threat to be eliminated. Traditionalists would see it as an affront to their ancestors' decision. Progressives might welcome it as a chance for historical reconciliation. Religious groups would be divided based on their theological frameworks regarding responsibility for past action." "In other words," Telex summarized, "disclosure would create a political firestorm with no predictable outcome." "Correct," Sela confirmed. "Though I should note that our trade corridor has already begun reshaping the political landscape. The economic benefits are being felt across human space, creating vested interests in stability. Any faction advocating for military action would face significant opposition from commercial entities now profiting from the initiative." Telex nodded, her enhancement lights pulsing with calculation. "That was always part of our strategy. Economic interdependence as a buffer against conflict." She paused. "Jorvis, your security assessment." Jorvis's cybernetic interfaces displayed a complex risk matrix. "The Genesis vault is secure for now, but long-term isolation is problematic. The facility requires periodic maintenance that will become increasingly difficult to disguise as standard mining operations. Additionally, there's the fundamental question: if resurrection were to proceed, how could it be kept secret? A new population of Droo would eventually need to integrate into galactic society." "Which brings us to the foundational question," Telex said, her voice growing serious. "Should resurrection proceed at all? Do we have the right to make that decision?" The room fell silent, each Grent processing the moral weight of the situation. "From a purely commercial perspective," Jorvis began cautiously, Resurrection would eventually create new markets, new trading partners. The Droo were innovative technologists before their militarism consumed them. But the risk of renewed conflict is substantial, Sela countered. War is always bad for business in the long run, no matter how profitable weapons manufacturing might be in the short term. There's also the question of the Droo themselves, Manthe added. Would a resurrected population, raised without the context of their original civilization, truly be Droo in any meaningful sense? Would they inherit the martial culture that led to their downfall, or would they develop along different lines? Talix absorbed these perspectives, her enhancement lights cycling through decision-making patterns. We must tell she concluded. This decision is too consequential for us alone. We need his historical perspective, his first-hand experience with both Droo and humans during the war. The others synchronized their enhancement lights in agreement. One more consideration, Jorvis added. The existing Droo survivors beyond the galaxy's edge. How do they factor into this equation? Do they have primary claim to the genetic repository? Should they be consulted before any decision is made? A valid point, Talix acknowledged. But contact remains problematic. Any transmission to their location risks exposure to human monitoring systems. She paused. Unless... The others recognized the pattern of her enhancement lights, the rapid cycling that indicated a new trading strategy forming. The trade corridor's Phase 3 would logically extend toward the galactic rim, she said slowly. If we positioned a hub at the furthest possible point, we could potentially establish a secure communication relay disguised as standard commercial traffic. Ambitious, Sela noted. The Council might question the economic viability of such a remote location. Then we'll need to make the economic case compelling, Talix replied. Resource surveys, projected trade volumes, strategic positioning for future expansion beyond the rim. We're good traders, we'll find the profit angle. The four synchronized their enhancement lights once more, this time in the pattern that signified a trading strategy accepted. We'll meet with tomorrow, Talix decided. For now, continue your assigned tasks. Manthe, prepare a comprehensive briefing on your ethical research. Sela, develop diplomatic scenarios for various disclosure outcomes. Jorvis, assess the technical requirements for resurrection if that path were chosen. I'll prepare the economic case for Phase 3 expansion. As they rose to leave, Talix activated the holographic image of the Genesis Vault once more. We came seeking profit, she reminded them, echoing their words from that first discovery. We found responsibility instead. Private quarters aboard the main hub were sparse by Grent standards. A trader who had seen multiple fortunes rise and fall knew the impermanence of material possessions. Still, a few treasures from his long career were displayed with care. A ceremonial knife from the first human diplomatic mission he had accompanied, a crystalline data storage device containing his complete trading history, and a small, seemingly unremarkable stone from Earth itself. When the four young Grent arrived, his enhancement lights pulsed with genuine pleasure. My most successful students, he greeted them. The initiative exceeds all projections. The Council speaks of you with respect usually reserved for traders 3 times your age. Thank you, teacher, Talix replied, her own enhancement lights dimming to indicate the serious nature of their visit. But we're here on a matter more complex than quarterly reports. Ancient eyes studied each of them in turn. You've discovered something else, he stated rather than asked. Something you've kept even from me. Yes, Talix confirmed. Security protocols are in place. We can speak freely here. For the next hour, they presented their discovery in meticulous detail. The Genesis Vault, its capabilities, their research into ethical frameworks, the political implications, and their tentative plans for Phase 3 expansion to establish contact with the surviving Droo colony. Listened without interruption, his enhancement lights cycling through patterns of surprise, calculation, and deep contemplation. When they finished, he rose and moved to the viewport, gazing out at the bustling activity of the trading hub. Ships coming and going, resources being exchanged, value being created. In all my centuries of trading, he said finally, I have never encountered a commodity as valuable or as dangerous as the choice you now face. What would you advise, teacher? Manthe asked. Turned back to them, his ancient eyes seeming to look beyond the present moment into multiple possible futures. First, understand this. There is no risk-free option. All paths forward carry profound consequences. His enhancement lights settled into the teaching pattern they remembered from their academy days. The preservationist ethics have merit. Extinction is indeed a tragedy, especially when it need not be permanent. The consequentialist view is pragmatic. Outcomes matter in ways intentions cannot predict. And the sovereigntist position has its own logic. Those who acted bear responsibility for those actions. But which framework should guide our decision? Jorvis pressed. None of them alone, Aum replied, and all of them together. True wisdom comes not from adhering to a single ethical system, but from understanding the insights and blindnesses of each. He moved to his small collection of treasures and lifted the unremarkable earthstone. This was given to me by a human diplomat during the final days of the war, he said, a token of appreciation for my attempts to broker peace negotiations. She told me it came from a place called Hiroshima, a city destroyed in an earlier human conflict, then rebuilt as a monument to peace. She said it reminded her that even the darkest moments can eventually lead to reconciliation. He placed the stone carefully back in its display. The humans are capable of remarkable moral growth, he continued. Their history is filled with atrocities followed by atonement, destruction followed by creation. They learn, albeit slowly and often at terrible cost. You believe they could accept a Droo resurrection? Sela asked, clearly skeptical. Some would, acknowledged. Others would not. The question is whether enough would choose reconciliation over renewed conflict. And that question cannot be answered with certainty until the moment of decision arrives. Then what do we do? Telex asked, frustration edging her voice. Wait for perfect certainty that will never come? Aum's enhancement lights pulsed with approval at her impatience. No, perfect certainty is never available in either trading or ethics. Instead, you create conditions that maximize the probability of your preferred outcome. He activated his own holographic display, merging their data into a multi-dimensional projection. Your Phase 3 expansion is wise, he said, studying the projection. Establishing communication with the surviving Droo colony is essential. They must have a voice in this decision. It is their genetic heritage, their existence at stake. The young Grent exchanged glances, their enhancement lights pulsing with relief that their teacher approved this part of their strategy. But contact is only the beginning, continued. If, and I stress if, resurrection is to proceed, it must be part of a comprehensive reconciliation process. Not a unilateral action, not a fait accompli presented to the galaxy, but a carefully orchestrated diplomatic initiative involving multiple species as guarantors and witnesses. The humans would never agree to resurrection negotiations, Sela objected. Not if framed as resurrection, no, agreed. But if approached as historical reconciliation, as an opportunity to address a painful chapter in galactic history, some would engage, particularly if economic incentives aligned with moral considerations. The trade corridor, Jorvis realized. It's already creating those incentives. Precisely, confirmed. Your initiative is laying groundwork beyond its stated purpose. Every new trading relationship, every interdependency, every mutual profit, all serve to create a web of connections that make conflict increasingly costly for all parties. Telex's enhancement lights cycled through analysis patterns. How long? How long until conditions might support disclosure? Decades, most likely, answered without hesitation. This is indeed a multi-generational project. The groundwork must be thorough, the timing exquisite. One misstep could trigger the very conflict we seek to prevent. And in the meantime, Manthe asked, the Genesis Vault remains dormant? The Droo beyond the rim continue in isolation, unaware of this discovery? For now, confirmed. Until communication is established, until diplomatic conditions improve, until the narrative around Droo history has been sufficiently recontextualized through your cultural artifact program? He looked at each of his former students in turn. You came to me seeking endorsement for a trade initiative. You returned with a moral quandary of galaxy-shaking proportions. In both cases, I have faith in your ability to navigate complex scenarios. You are Grent traders in the finest tradition, seeing opportunity where others see only risk, creating value where others see only cost. The four synchronized their enhancement lights in gratitude for his confidence. We'll proceed with Phase 3, Talix decided. Establish the communication relay, make contact with the surviving colony. Only then, with their input, will we make any decision regarding the Genesis Vault. A wise approach, approved, and I will accelerate my own network's efforts to reshape the narrative around Droo history. The more context we can provide, the more nuanced the galactic understanding becomes, the better our chances of eventual reconciliation. As the meeting concluded, Amma offered one final thought. Remember the fifth lesson from our study of the Droo: adaptability is key. No plan survives first contact with reality unchanged. Be prepared to adjust, to redirect, to find new paths forward as circumstances evolve. The young Grent filed out, their enhancement lights pulsing with renewed purpose and determination. Only Talix remained behind, sensing that her teacher had more to say in private. When the others had gone, turned to her. There's something else, something you haven't shared with your colleagues. Talix's enhancement lights flickered with surprise. How did you know? I taught you everything about trading, but not everything about reading enhancement patterns, replied. Yours have been cycling through conflict sequences whenever the Genesis Vault is mentioned. There's another factor you're considering. Talix hesitated, then activated her personal data crystal. A new hologram appeared, detailed scans of the Vault's interior systems. The facility isn't just dormant, she said quietly. It's programmed to activate automatically if it detects certain conditions. One of those conditions appears to be sustained presence of Grent cybernetic signatures. Am's ancient eyes widened. The Droo knew about us, about our potential role? It seems so, Talix confirmed. The system is already awakening, teacher. Slowly, subtly, but undeniably. The maintenance routines have begun. Within 5 standard years, it will reach the point of requiring active intervention, either to continue toward resurrection or to permanently deactivate. Absorbed this information, his enhancement lights cycling through rapid calculation patterns. 5 years, he mused. Not decades after all. The timeline has compressed significantly. What do we do? Talix asked, for once sounding like the student she had once been rather than the accomplished trader she had become. Am's enhancement lights settled into a resolved pattern. We adapt. We accelerate our plans. Phase 3 begins immediately. Contact with the surviving colony becomes our highest priority, and we prepare contingencies for multiple outcomes, including the possibility that we might need to act before ideal conditions are established. The risk, Talix began, is substantial, acknowledged. But risk and opportunity are two faces of the same economic reality. Sometimes the boldest trade is the most profitable. Talix synchronized her enhancement lights with his, accepting his guidance. For the good of galactic trade, she recited, and for something more. Indeed, agreed, his ancient eyes turning once more to the small stone from Earth. For something much more. The Phase 3 hub took shape at the very edge of charted space, its construction accelerated by resources diverted from a dozen other Grent projects. The Trading Council had questioned the economic rationale briefly, but Talix's presentation of projected trade routes beyond the galactic rim had been masterfully convincing. The numbers, carefully crafted by Jorvis to appear conservative while actually being quite optimistic, had silenced all opposition. Now, 3 standard years later, the hub stood complete, a marvel of engineering positioned closer to the intergalactic void than any permanent installation in known history. Its official purpose was to serve as a gateway for future exploration and resource development. Its actual purpose was known only to 5 Grent in the entire galaxy. In the communication center, buried deep within the hub's core and shielded by layers of security that officially didn't exist, Talix reviewed the final preparations with her colleagues. "Transmission array is aligned," Jorvis reported, his cybernetic interfaces monitoring the sophisticated equipment. "Encrypted using the protocols found in the archive. If the survivors maintain their communication systems, they should be able to receive and decrypt." "Message composition?" Talix inquired, turning to Manthe. "Completed and verified," Manthe confirmed. "Historical authentication markers embedded throughout. Brief summary of galactic development since their departure. Explanation of our discovery of the Genesis Vault. Request for contact and guidance." "And diplomatic considerations?" Talix asked Sela. "We've emphasized our role as neutral intermediaries," Sela explained. "Made clear that we're not allied with humans but maintain trading relationships with them. Stressed that no action regarding the vault will be taken without their input, and included Om's personal authentication code from the war era. They should recognize it if they maintain historical records." Talix nodded, her enhancement lights cycling through final decision patterns. "Time estimate for response?" "If they're monitoring for transmissions, days or weeks," Jorvis calculated. "If not, possibly months. The signal will repeat at intervals, growing stronger each time." "Very well, proceed with transmission." Jorvis activated the array. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then a subtle vibration passed through the hub as enormous energies were channeled and focused into a tight beam aimed at coordinates extracted from the Droo archive. "Transmission complete," Jorvis announced. "Now we wait." The waiting proved shorter than any of them had anticipated. Just 17 standard days later, as Talix was reviewing resource allocation for the trade corridor's ongoing operations, Jorvis burst into her office, his enhancement lights pulsing with excitement. "We've received a response," he announced without preamble, "encrypted using our own protocols. They're still out there, Talix, and they've been watching." The message was brief but unambiguous. Coordinates for a rendezvous point in neutral space, a time frame, and a request that Om himself be present. The signature code matched those in the archive, confirming its authenticity. "They know Om," Manthe noted with surprise. "Personally, it seems he never mentioned direct contact with Droo leadership," Sela observed, though he always said his network included those who had maintained connections with both sides. "Perhaps he had his own secrets," Talix suggested. "We'll find out soon enough. The rendezvous is scheduled for next month, just enough time to make arrangements without arousing suspicion." Preparations moved forward with characteristic Grent efficiency. A small, fast ship was requisitioned for specialized trade negotiations. Crew selections were made with utmost care. The official destination was logged as a potential new trading partner in an unremarkable system. Technically true, if deliberately misleading. When the day of departure arrived, Om joined the 4 young Grent aboard the ship, his ancient eyes gleaming with an energy they hadn't seen before. "Nervous, teacher?" Talix asked as they prepared for FTL jump. "Cautiously optimistic," Om replied. "I never thought I would see Droo again in my lifetime, yet here we are, embarking on a mission that could reshape galactic history." "You knew them?" Jorvis said, not a question but a statement. "During the war, you had direct contact?" Om's enhancement lights cycled through patterns of old memories being accessed. "Yes. Before the final phase of the conflict, when peace still seemed possible, I served as an intermediary, carrying messages between human and Droo diplomats when direct communication had broken down." "You never told us," Manthe noted, no accusation in her voice, merely observation. "Some experiences are too painful to revisit without purpose," Om said simply. And until now, there was no purpose in revisiting those particular memories. The ship jumped to FTL, the stars stretching into lines of light before resolving into the featureless gray of hyperspace. For 3 days they traveled in relative silence, each processing the magnitude of what they were undertaking. When they arrived at the rendezvous coordinates, they found seemingly empty space. No ships, no stations, nothing but distant stars, and the vast void between galaxies visible as a dark emptiness against the stellar backdrop. "Are we early?" Sella wondered, her diplomatic enhancement scanning for any sign of contact. "No," Jorvis replied, monitoring the ship's sensors. "Wait, there's something. A distortion in the gravitational field. Something is here, just hidden." As if in response to his observation, space itself seemed to ripple. A section of apparent emptiness shimmered and then solidified into a ship, sleek, alien, and unmistakably Droo in design. "Cloaking technology," Jorvis breathed, his enhancement lights pulsing with technical appreciation, far beyond anything in current use. A communication request chimed through their systems. With a nod from Arm, Talix accepted the connection. The view screen resolved to show a being that matched the historical images of the Droo, with an exoskeletal structure that gave them a somewhat insectoid appearance, multiple manipulating appendages, and large compound eyes that seemed to shimmer with inner light. Yet there were differences too, adaptations perhaps to their long isolation. "Trader Am," the Droo greeted, its voice processed through translation software yet carrying unmistakable emotion. "You have aged." "As have you, Diplomat Methrex," Am replied, stepping forward. "I did not expect to find you personally among the survivors." "I was junior during our negotiations," the Droo Methrex acknowledged. "But I never forgot your efforts for peace. When your message arrived with your authentication code, I insisted on leading this mission myself." The Droo's compound eyes shifted to take in the other Grent. "These are your students, the ones who discovered the vault?" "Yes," Am confirmed. "Telix, our expedition leader, Jorvis, our technical specialist, Sella, our diplomatic expert, and Manthi, our historical analyst." Methrex studied them each in turn. "You have taught them well, it seems. They found what was meant to remain hidden until the proper time. The question now is, has that proper time arrived?" "That is what we've come to discuss," Telix said, stepping forward. "The vault systems have begun automated activation sequences. Within 2 standard years they will require direct intervention, either to proceed with resurrection protocols or to deactivate permanently." Methrex's exoskeletal structure shifted in what might have been a sigh. "Then the decision can no longer be postponed. We have much to discuss, Grand Traders, much history to share, many possibilities to consider." "Will you come aboard?" Am invited. "Or would you prefer we join you?" "Neither for now," Methrex decided. "This initial contact must remain deniable for all parties. Instead, I will provide you with data crystals containing our history since the Exodus, our current situation, and our perspective on potential resurrection scenarios. You will provide similar information about galactic developments, the status of human civilization, and your trade corridor initiative. Then we will reconvene in 1 standard month, at coordinates I will provide for substantive negotiations." "Agreeable terms," Am acknowledged, falling naturally into trading patterns. "With one addition. We request information about your colony's current status, population, resources, technological development. This will help us assess the full range of options moving forward." Methrex seemed to hesitate, compound eyes flickering. "Acceptable, though I must warn you, our situation is not what you might expect. Survival has required adaptations." The exchange of information proceeded efficiently, data crystals transferred via automated drones to maintain the deniability Methrex had specified. Throughout the process, the Droo ship remained partially cloaked, revealing just enough of itself to facilitate the transfer. As they prepared to depart, Methrex addressed them one final time. "Be cautious, Grent Traders. The knowledge you now possess would be coveted by many and feared by more. Trust no one outside your immediate circle." "For the good of galactic trade," Talix replied with the traditional Grent farewell, "and for the future of all species," Methrex added before the view screen went dark and the Droo ship shimmered back into invisibility. As their own vessel jumped back to FTL, the 5 Grent gathered in the ship's secure conference room. The data crystals sat in the center of the table, their alien architecture somehow ominous despite their small size. "Well," Jorvis said, breaking the silence, That was momentous, Manthe supplied. The first documented contact with living Droo in nearly a century. And potentially just the beginning, Sela added, depending on what those crystals contain. Reached for one of the crystals, his ancient hand steadied despite the gravity of the moment. Let us find out what the future holds. The contents of the Droo data crystals proved more complex and disturbing than any of them had anticipated. In the secure analysis chamber aboard their ship, the five Grent watched as the final recording played out, Methrek's personal narrative of the Droo exodus and its aftermath. Our flight beyond the galactic rim was desperate, Methrek's voice explained as holographic images showed Droo ships moving through the intergalactic void. Fewer than 10,000 individuals escaped the human extermination campaign. Our resources were limited, our technology damaged by the hasty departure. The images shifted to show a barren planetoid, little more than a large asteroid with a thin artificial atmosphere contained by force fields. This became our home. Haven, we called it. Not a world that could support us naturally, but one we could adapt to our needs, or so we believed. Methrek's narrative continued, describing how the Droo population struggled to establish a self-sustaining colony. Initial successes gave way to mounting problems, genetic bottlenecks from the limited population, resource shortages, and psychological trauma from witnessing the destruction of their civilization. By the third generation, it became clear that conventional survival was impossible, Methrex explained, the hologram now showing medical facilities and laboratories. Our population was declining despite all efforts. Our genetics were degrading. Haven's resources were insufficient for long-term habitation. The images changed again, displaying what appeared to be Droo undergoing some form of transformation, their exoskeletal structures being augmented with technological components. We faced extinction or adaptation, Methrek's voice continued. We chose adaptation. Cybernetic enhancement at first, similar to your own Grent modifications but more extensive, then binaural integration, synthetic organ replacement, consciousness transfer protocols. With each generation we became less organic, more something else. The final images showed current Droo beings that bore only passing resemblance to their ancestors. Their exoskeletons were now largely synthetic, their compound eyes replaced with sensor arrays, their internal organs mostly mechanical. Today, only 237 Droo remain, Methrex concluded, and none of us are fully organic. We exist in a state between biological and mechanical existence. The question of resurrection, therefore, becomes more complex. Would we resurrect our species as they were or as we have become? And would either form be accepted by a galaxy that decreed our extinction? The recording ended, leaving the five Grent in stunned silence. They're cyborgs, Jorvis finally said, his technical enhancements rapidly analyzing the data. Far beyond our own cybernetic augmentations, some appear to be almost entirely mechanical with only traces of original Droo biology. Are they even Droo anymore? Sela wondered. Legally, philosophically, practically? They consider themselves Droo, Manthe pointed out. Identity persists through transformation, just as we remain Grent despite our enhancements. But the scale is different, Telex argued. Our cybernetics supplement our biology. Theirs has largely replaced it. Had remained silent throughout the recording, his ancient eyes fixed on the final images of the transformed Droo. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. This changes the nature of our dilemma, he observed. Resurrection from the Genesis Vault would not be continuing their species as it exists now, but creating a separate branch, a biological population distinct from the cybernetic one. The political implications are significant, Sela noted, her diplomatic enhancements calculating scenarios. Humans feared biological Droo, defined by their martial culture and expansionist tendencies. Would they view these cybernetic Droo as the same threat, or as something new entirely? And how would biological Droo, raised from the Genesis Vault, relate to their cybernetic cousins? Manthe added. Would they recognize each other as the same species? Share the same values and goals? Telex's enhancement light cycled through analysis patterns. We need to review all the data before our next meeting with Mithrax. Jervis, focus on the technical aspects of their transformation. Manthe, historical and cultural implications. Sella, diplomatic scenarios based on this new information. And you, teacher? She asked, turning to I will review my own memories of the Droo I knew during the war, he replied, to assess how much of their original identity persists in these transformed beings, and to consider what that means for our path forward. For the next month, as their ship made its way back to the trade corridor, the 5 Grent immersed themselves in analysis. The Droo data crystals contained far more than Mithrex's narrative. Detailed histories, scientific research, philosophical treatises on their transformation, and assessments of galactic politics from their hidden vantage point. They've been monitoring us, Jervis reported during one analysis session, not actively interfacing with our systems, but observing. Their cloaking technology has allowed them to send small probes throughout the galaxy. They know more about current affairs than we initially assumed, including our Trade Corridor Initiative, Sella added. According to these records, they've been watching its development with great interest. They recognized it as potentially laying groundwork for their eventual return. Return? Manthe questioned. The data suggests they've adapted to their isolation. Why would they seek to rejoin a galaxy that tried to exterminate them? Because isolation is killing them, Telex pointed out. Their population continues to decline despite their transformations. Without new resources, new technologies, possibly even new genetic material from the vault, they face extinction regardless. Nodded slowly. They are caught between impossible choices. Remain hidden and eventually die out, reveal themselves and risk human hostility, resurrect their biological form and face questions of identity and purpose. No wonder they sought us out as intermediaries. As the rendezvous date approached, they formulated a series of possible proposals, each balancing the interests of the cybernetic Droo, the potential biological Droo, humanity, and the broader galactic community. None were perfect, all carried substantial risks. But as had taught them, trading was about finding the optimal balance of risk and opportunity. When they arrived at the new coordinates Mithrax had provided, they found not a single ship, but a small space station, its design clearly Droo but adapted with technologies borrowed from multiple species. "Welcome to Nexus," Mithrax greeted them as they docked. "Our forward operating base for the past 50 standard years. From here we have observed the galaxy we once called home." Inside they found more cybernetic Droo, perhaps 20 in total, each unique in their adaptations yet clearly part of the same collective. Unlike the threatening Droo of historical accounts, these beings moved with a careful grace, their mechanical components humming softly as they worked at stations monitoring distant sectors of the galaxy. "You've reviewed our data," Mithrax stated rather than asked. "Compound sensor arrays focusing on each Grent in turn. You understand our situation." "We do," Telex confirmed, "and we've developed several potential approaches to address the complex issues at hand." For the next 3 days, they engaged in intensive negotiations, not the usual trade discussions focused on material value, but something far more fundamental: the future of a species, the stability of galactic peace, the ethics of resurrection and transformation. The cybernetic Droo, it emerged, were divided on the question of resurrection. Some viewed the Genesis Vault as a chance to restore their biological heritage, a complement to their transformed existence. Others feared that biological Droo, raised without the humbling experience of near extinction, might eventually repeat the mistakes that led to the war. "We have evolved through necessity," Mithrax explained during one session. "Our transformation was not merely physical, but philosophical. We abandoned the martial culture that defined our ancestors. We embraced a more contemplative existence, focused on preservation rather than expansion. Our current form reflects our new philosophy," Mithrax continued, gesturing to the cybernetic components that had replaced much of their biological structure. We question whether biological Droo, even with careful education, would follow the same path. Telex's enhancement lights cycled thoughtfully. What if the resurrection were gradual? A small initial population raised with guidance from both your people and selected intermediaries from other species? A measured approach has merit, agreed, combined with continued expansion of the trade corridor to strengthen economic interdependency. After further deliberation, a compromise emerged. The Genesis Vault would be activated, but under strict protocols. A small biological Droo population would be established within Grent territory, officially as cultural consultants for archaeological research. The surviving cybernetic Droo would gradually reveal themselves as a separate but related species, beginning with diplomatic contacts through Grent intermediaries. It will take decades, Methrex acknowledged, perhaps centuries before full integration is possible, but after nearly 100 years in exile, we have learned patience. 6 months later, as Telex stood in the secure facility watching the first Droo embryos develop in their incubation chambers, she reflected on their journey. What had begun as a quest for profit had evolved into something far more profound. The resurrection of a species, the healing of ancient wounds, the creation of new possibilities. Joined her, his ancient eyes contemplating the tiny developing lives. "Teacher," she asked quietly, "did we make the right choice?" "The right choice?" enhancement lights pulsed with amusement. "In trading, as in life, we rarely know with certainty. But we made a profitable choice, not just in credits, but in possibility. And that, young trader, is the greatest profit of all." As they left the chamber, the embryonic Droo continued their development, unaware that they represented both an ending and a beginning, the conclusion of extinction and the dawn of a new chapter in galactic history. One standard month after the first Droo embryos began development, Telex found herself in an unusual position, negotiating a trade agreement with a species that officially didn't exist. In the secure conference room deep within the trade corridor's administrative core, holographic displays showed resource projections and exchange protocols, while cybernetic Droo representatives studied them with unblinking sensor array. "The terms are acceptable," Methrex concluded after a brief consultation with his colleagues, "though we require an additional security protocol for shipments entering Haven space." Telex's enhancement light cycled in acknowledgement. "Our technical division will implement whatever safeguards you deem necessary. Jorvis has already developed 17 different masking configurations for the cargo vessels." Beside her, Jorvis displayed a rotating hologram showing specialized ships designed to appear as standard mining vessels, but containing hidden compartments and signal-dampening technology. Each configuration can be randomized to prevent pattern recognition. To any external observer, these will appear to be routine resource extraction operations. "Impressive," Methrex acknowledged, his synthetic components humming softly. "You, Grent, have always understood the value of discretion in profitable trading." The agreement they were finalizing represented an unprecedented arrangement. The cybernetic Droo would provide advanced technological schematics and rare materials gathered from beyond the galactic rim, while the Grent would supply biological necessities for the Genesis Vault and essential resources the isolated Haven colony desperately needed. "There's one matter we haven't fully addressed," Sella interjected, her diplomatic enhancements calculating risk factors. "The biological stabilization protocols for the new embryos require specialized expertise we don't currently possess." An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. What Sella was tactfully suggesting was that the embryonic Droo were developing complications, genetic instabilities that the Grent's biological sciences couldn't resolve. "We anticipated this," Methrex replied after a moment. "The data crystal I've just transmitted contains complete instructions for constructing neural linkage systems. With them, our specialists can remotely guide your technicians through the necessary procedures." "Remote guidance carries significant detection risks," Monthi noted, her historical databases projecting potential failure scenarios. Human monitoring systems scan all transmissions within 50 light-years of their core systems, which is why the neural linkage uses quantum entanglement rather than conventional signals, Methrex explained. Undetectable by any current technology, this is one of the advancements we developed during our isolation. Tillich's enhancement lights pulsed with appreciation. Such technology alone would justify our arrangement. The commercial applications are considerable, Methrex interrupted, but secondary to our current purpose. The Genesis protocols must be stabilized within the next 60 days, or this first generation will fail. The directness of his statement sobered the Grent traders. Behind the commercial calculations and diplomatic considerations lay a stark reality. They were attempting to prevent the final extinction of an ancient species. We'll allocate whatever resources are necessary, Telex assured him. Our council has approved special discretionary funding for the Trade Corridor's Advanced Research Initiatives, the official designation for our work with you. And what of the council itself? Methrex inquired, his sensor arrays focusing intently on Telex. Do they suspect the true nature of these initiatives? They know only what we've chosen to tell them, answered, speaking for the first time in the meeting. The ancient trader had been observing quietly from a corner. That we've discovered valuable Droo artifacts and technology requiring special handling and research. The council cares for results, not methods. A convenient arrangement, Methrex observed, his mechanical appendages making a gesture that might have been amusement, not unlike our own governance structures before the war. The meeting concluded with formal protocol exchanges. Authentication codes, security clearances, and transportation schedules carefully encrypted and integrated into the Trade Corridor's legitimate operations. To an outside observer, nothing would appear unusual about the increased activity in search. Just another profitable venture for the ever-enterprising Grent. As the Droo representatives prepared to depart in their cloaked shuttle, Methrex approached Telex privately. There is one matter we haven't discussed in the open session, he said, his voice modulated to prevent even enhanced Grent hearing from detecting it. The Genesis Vault isn't merely struggling with this first small batch of embryos. Its systems were designed to operate at much larger capacity. Larger? Telex questioned. By what factor? Orders of magnitude, Methrex replied. The facility was built to process thousands of embryos simultaneously, with production capacity in the millions over time. Operating at minimal capacity causes system instabilities that threaten the entire project. Telex's enhancement lights cycled through rapid calculation patterns. You're suggesting we should significantly expand the resurrection program? Before we've even successfully stabilized the first generation? I am stating a technical reality, Methrex corrected. The systems function optimally at higher production levels, just as your trading networks become more efficient with increased volume. Before Telex could respond, Methrex transmitted a data packet directly to her personal storage. Review this when you're alone, he instructed. It contains the full technical specifications of the Genesis Vault's optimal operational parameters. The decision, of course, remains yours. Hours later, in her private quarters, Telex reviewed the data Methrex had provided. The specifications were staggering. The vault had been designed not for gradual species revival, but for full-scale civilization restoration. At optimal capacity, it could produce up to 10 million viable Droo embryos per standard year. Her enhancement lights pulsed with concern as she contemplated the implications. Their carefully measured approach to Droo resurrection suddenly seemed inadequate to the technology they were working with. Yet the political risks of accelerated production were equally daunting. A soft chime announced a visitor. Telex quickly secured the data before acknowledging the request. "Enter," she called, her voice modulator automatically shifting to a more formal register. Stepped into the room, his ancient eyes immediately registering the tension in her enhancement patterns. "Methrex spoke with you privately," he observed. Not a question. "Yes," Telex confirmed. He provided additional specifications for the vault's operations. "And suggested accelerated production," added, settling into a chair across from her. I suspected as much. His enhancement patterns showed decision trees activating whenever production schedules were mentioned. You've become quite adept at reading cybernetic Droo enhancements, Telex noted. A skill developed during the war, acknowledged. Their biological ancestors displayed similar pattern sequences when formulating strategy. Telex hesitated, then activated a secure holographic display showing the vault's specifications. According to this data, the system becomes increasingly unstable below certain production thresholds. Our current approach may actually endanger the project. Studied the display, his enhancement lights cycling through analysis patterns. Or this could be a calculated move to accelerate resurrection beyond our agreed timeline. You suspect deception? Telex asked, surprised. Their entire arrangement with the Droo had been built on mutual necessity and carefully negotiated trust. Not deception, clarified. Perspective. Remember that the cybernetic Droo, despite their transformation, still carry the cultural memory of a species that faced extinction. Their primary imperative is survival and restoration. Ours is profitable trade with acceptable risk levels. But if the technical specifications are accurate, then we face a more complex calculation than anticipated, finished for her. One that requires careful analysis. Telex's enhancement lights pulsed with decision-making patterns. I'll have Jorvis verify the specifications independently. If they prove accurate, we'll need to reconsider our production schedule. A wise approach, approved. But there's another factor to consider. His expression grew serious. I've noticed an increase in human visitors to our primary trading hubs. Nothing suspicious in any individual case. Researchers, trade negotiators, tourists exploring the new frontier we've opened. But the pattern suggests more than coincidental interest. You think they suspect something? Telex asked, her enhancement lights dimming with concern. Humans have always been paranoid about the Droo, reminded her. Even after all this time, their intelligence services maintain special divisions focused solely on detecting any sign of Droo resurgence. We must assume they're watching us, even if they don't yet know what they're looking for. All the more reason to ensure our operations remain undetectable, Telex noted. If Methrex is correct about system instabilities, a catastrophic failure at the vault could create signals that even our security measures couldn't contain. Nodded slowly. Proceed with the verification. If expansion proves necessary, we will adapt our plans accordingly, but with even greater security protocols. As he left, Telex returned to the data, her enhancement lights cycling through complex decision trees. What had begun as a carefully controlled experiment was rapidly evolving into something far more ambitious. The question was no longer whether they could resurrect a few Droo as cultural consultants, but whether they were embarking on the wholesale rebirth of a civilization, and whether the galaxy was ready for such a resurrection. Jorvis's verification proved conclusive. The Genesis Vault systems were indeed designed for mass production and became increasingly unstable at lower operational levels. The Grent traders found themselves facing an unexpected choice: drastically expand the resurrection program or risk losing it entirely to cascading system failures. In the secure command center adjacent to the Vault facility, disguised as a standard mining operation, Telex reviewed the options with her team. The diagnostic simulations confirm Methrax data, Jorvis reported. His technical enhancements directly interfaced with the facility's systems. The Vault's neural matrices are exhibiting degradation patterns consistent with suboptimal operational parameters. Put simply, the system was built to run hot. Attempting to run it cool is causing damage. How significant is the degradation? Telex asked. At current production levels, critical failure within 138 standard days, Jorvis projected. Less if we continue experiencing genetic stabilization issues with the current embryo batch. Manthus historical databases had been analyzing the Vault's design philosophy. The architecture suggests a wartime contingency plan intended for rapid species restoration following catastrophic population loss. The Droo who built this weren't thinking about careful, diplomatic reintegration. They were ensuring species survival at all costs, which aligns with their historical patterns, Sela added. The Droo never did anything by half measures. Their entire civilization operated on principles of redundancy and overwhelming force. Telex's enhancement lights cycled through decision-making patterns. Om's network has made progress reshaping the narrative around Droo history, but nowhere near enough to prepare the galaxy for mass resurrection. Yet the technical realities leave us little choice. There is another option, Sela suggested, her diplomatic enhancements calculating alternative scenarios. We could permanently deactivate the vault, preserve the current embryo batch through manual intervention, but shut down the main systems before catastrophic failure occurs. A heavy silence fell over the room as the Grent traders contemplated this possibility. It would mean abandoning their grand vision of species restoration, settling instead for a tiny population of Droo that would forever exist as cultural curiosities rather than a restored civilization. The cybernetic Droo would never accept such an outcome, Manthe observed. Not after coming so close to resurrection. Their acceptance isn't required, Jorvis countered. We control the facility. The decision is ours. Telex moved to the viewing window overlooking the embryonic development chamber. Below, specialized Grent medical technicians monitored the first batch of developing Droo, their small forms floating in nutrient solution, delicate exoskeletal structures just beginning to form. No, she said finally. We didn't embark on this project to resurrect a museum exhibit. If the system requires higher production levels to remain stable, then we scale up accordingly, but with additional safeguards. Her enhancement lights settled into a resolved pattern. Jorvis, develop a phased expansion protocol. Begin with a production increase sufficient to stabilize the systems, but design it for gradual implementation to avoid sudden resource demands that might. Manthe, accelerate your historical contextualizing work. Focus on academic and cultural circles with influence on human policy decisions. We need to reshape the narrative faster than originally planned. Sela, prepare diplomatic contingencies for various discovery scenarios. If our work is exposed before we're ready, we need response strategies ranging from limited disclosure to full transparency. As her colleagues acknowledged their assignments, Telex activated the facility's secure communication array. I'll inform Om he'll need to expand his network's activities and allocate additional resources. And the Droo? Sela asked. Do we inform Methrex of our decision? Yes, Telex confirmed, but with clearly defined parameters. This remains our initiative, operating on our timeline. We're accommodating technical necessities, not abandoning our strategic approach. Within days, the expansion began. Resource allocations to the Special Research Division doubled, then tripled, carefully disguised within the trade corridor's overall growth. Additional facilities were constructed ostensibly for resource processing, but actually housing expanded embryonic development chambers. The neural linkage system allowed cybernetic Droo specialists to guide Grent technicians remotely, resolving the genetic stabilization issues that had threatened the first generation. Production scaled up gradually, from dozens of embryos to hundreds, then thousands. The Volt's systems stabilized, operating within optimal parameters for the first time since activation. What had begun as a cautious experiment transformed into a full-scale resurrection program, hidden beneath layers of secrecy and misdirection. 3 months into the expansion, Om requested a private meeting with Telex aboard his personal vessel, a location guaranteed to be free from any potential monitoring. Our initiative has taken on a momentum of its own, he observed as they sat in his ship's secure conference room. The resource allocation reports cross my desk daily. The scale has become significant. Telex recognized the concern beneath his measured tone. The technical requirements left us little choice. Scaling back would have meant losing everything we'd accomplished. I understand the reasoning, Om assured her, but we must acknowledge the reality. We've moved beyond resurrection to restoration. The current production capacity could generate a viable population base for an entire civilization within a decade. Is that not what we ultimately intended? Telex questioned. The timeline has accelerated, but the goal remains the same. Ahm's enhancement lights cycled through contemplative patterns. Goals and methods are intertwined, young trader. A slower approach would have allowed galactic opinion to evolve naturally. This acceleration puts us at risk of outpacing our diplomatic groundwork. He activated a holographic display showing security logs from various trade corridor facilities. Human presence has increased 47% across our network in the past quarter. On the surface, nothing suspicious. Research partnerships, trade delegations, cultural exchanges, all legitimate, all reasonable given our initiative's public success. But the pattern suggests intelligence gathering, Telex concluded, studying the data. Precisely. Humans have always excelled at hiding observers in plain sight. Military intelligence embedded in research teams, security analysts posing as cultural attachés. Their methods are subtle but effective. Have they discovered anything? Telex asked, her enhancement lights dimming with concern. Not yet, as far as we can determine. Our security protocols have held, but the increased attention itself is telling. Something has triggered their suspicion. Telex considered this sobering assessment. Should we scale back? Try to reduce their interest by lowering our profile? Too late for that, Ahm replied. Sudden changes now would only heighten suspicion. No, we must maintain course while enhancing our countermeasures, which brings me to my proposal. He adjusted the holographic display to show a new facility design. A secondary production site, completely disconnected from our primary networks. Located in an unremarkable system beyond even our trade corridor's official boundaries. A redundancy should our main operation be compromised. Telex studied the design, her enhancement lights pulsing with appreciation for its elegance. A significant investment, less costly than losing everything to discovery, Ahm noted. The corridor's profits can easily absorb the expense if properly structured. And staffing. A second facility would require trusted personnel we can ill afford to spare from the main operation. I've identified suitable candidates from my former students, ones with both the necessary skills and appropriate ethical frameworks. They would be told only what they need to know, a special research initiative, sensitive but legitimate. Telex's enhancement lights cycled through analytical patterns. The proposal was sound. A classic risk mitigation strategy, yet it represented another step deeper into their growing enterprise, another escalation from their original, modest plan. Very well, she decided finally. Proceed with the secondary facility, but let's also consider an extraction protocol, a way to quickly secure our existing embryos should discovery become imminent. Ahm's enhancement lights pulsed with approval. Already in development, Jervis has designed specialized transport vessels disguised as standard medical evacuation ships. They could relocate the viable embryos to secured facilities within hours of activation. As they concluded their meeting, Telex found herself reflecting on how far they had come from that first discovery in the abandoned Droo archive. What had begun as a trade initiative had evolved into something far more complex. A massive, clandestine operation dedicated to resurrecting an extinct civilization. Teacher, she said as they prepared to part, do you ever question whether we've exceeded our mandate? Whether we've taken on responsibilities beyond what traders should bear? Ahm's ancient eyes studied her for a long moment. Every day, he acknowledged. But then I remember, the greatest traders in history were never merely merchants exchanging goods. They were civilization builders, creating connections between worlds, establishing foundations for progress and prosperity. His enhancement light settled into a pattern of certainty. We are not merely trading in goods, young Telex. We are trading in possibility, the most valuable commodity of all. As she returned to her duties, Telex carried those words with her, finding reassurance in their wisdom. Yet beneath that reassurance lay a persistent concern that in their quest to restore one civilization, they might be risking another. The relationship between the Grent traders and the cybernetic Droo evolved rapidly as the Resurrection program expanded. What had begun as cautious cooperation transformed into an integrated operation, with Droo specialists becoming increasingly involved in the day-to-day management of the Genesis facilities. 6 months into the expanded production, a secure meeting room in the Phase 3 hub hosted what had become a regular joint strategy session. Telex and her team sat across from Methrex and 3 other cybernetic Droo, discussing progress and challenges with the familiarity of long-standing partners. The 15th generation has shown marked improvement in neurological development, Methrex reported, his sensor arrays displaying satisfaction patterns. The modifications to the growth medium have resolved the synaptic formation issues we encountered in previous batches. Credit goes to your biochemical specialists, Jorvis acknowledged. The neural linkage system has proven invaluable for real-time adjustments to the cultivation protocols. Manthi, monitoring the cultural development curriculum being prepared for the maturing embryos, raised a concern that had been growing in recent weeks. We should discuss the educational frameworks again. The current program emphasizes Droo history from a primarily victorious perspective. The subtle shift in her enhancement patterns didn't go unnoticed by the Droo. Methrex's mechanical appendages made a gesture of concession. You refer to the historical modules covering the pre-war expansion period, he noted. You find them too triumphalist. They present territorial conquest as inherently beneficial, Manthi explained diplomatically. The emphasis on Droo cultural superiority and manifest destiny echoes precisely the attitudes that led to conflict with humanity. These are historical facts, countered Trelvik, one of the Droo specialists whose synthetic components seemed more pronounced than Methrex. Our civilization achieved greatness through expansion and strength. Would you have us teach our descendants to be ashamed of their heritage? Not ashamed, Sela interjected, her diplomatic enhancements working to diffuse the tension, but contextually aware. For successful reintegration into galactic society, the new generation must understand why the war occurred and how to prevent similar conflicts. Reintegration presupposes subordination, Trelvik replied, an edge entering his synthesized voice. That we must accommodate ourselves to galactic standards set by the very species that tried to exterminate us. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. It was the first time any of the cybernetic Droo had so openly expressed resentment toward the current galactic order, and by extension toward humanity. Methrex's sensor rays pulsed in what the Grent had come to recognize as a calming pattern. My colleague speaks from historical passion, not current policy. Our survival has taught us the value of coexistence. Of course, Telex acknowledged, though her enhancement lights betrayed her concern. Nevertheless, Manthi raises a valid point. The educational frameworks will shape how the new generation perceives their place in the galaxy. Balance is essential. We will review the modules, Methrex conceded. Perhaps a joint committee could develop revisions acceptable to both our perspectives. The meeting continued, addressing technical matters, resource allocations, and security protocols. Yet the brief moment of tension had revealed something important. Beneath the cybernetic Droo's carefully maintained facade of philosophical transformation, old attitudes remained. Later, in Telex's private office, the Grent traders discussed the implications. Trelvik's reaction wasn't an aberration, Manthi observed, her historical databases correlating behavioral patterns. I'd noted similar responses from other Droo specialists when discussing post-resurrection scenarios. There's a consistent undercurrent of reclamation thinking. Meaning? Telex prompted. They don't view resurrection as merely survival or cultural preservation, Manthi explained. Some see it as restoration of their rightful place in the galactic order, a return to prominence. That contradicts everything Methrex has told us about their philosophical evolution, Sela noted, their supposed abandonment of expansionist thinking. Not necessarily, Jorvis countered. Methrex may genuinely believe in coexistence, but we're dealing with 237 individuals who spent a century in isolation, watching the galaxy move on without them. It would be surprising if they all shared identical perspectives. Telex's enhancement lights cycled through analysis patterns. Is this a security concern? Could factional divisions among the Droo compromise our operation? Difficult to assess, Manthe replied. The cybernetic Droo maintain their own secure communication channels. We only see what they choose to show us during official interactions. Which brings us to a related matter, Jorvis added, activating a secure holographic display. I've been monitoring resource utilization patterns across our facilities. There are discrepancies, small, carefully distributed, but present. The display showed a complex network of resource flows with highlighted anomalies throughout the system. Explain, Telex requested, her enhancement lights focusing on the data. Certain materials are being diverted, Jorvis elaborated. Specialized alloys, quantum computational components, advanced propulsion elements. Nothing dramatic in any single instance, but the cumulative pattern is significant. The Droo are siphoning resources, Sella concluded, her diplomatic enhancements already calculating potential responses. For what purpose? Unknown, Jorvis admitted. But given the types of materials involved, I would hypothesize technology development beyond what's been disclosed to us. A heavy silence fell over the room as the Grent traders absorbed this revelation. After everything they had risked for the Droo resurrection, after all the resources they had committed, their partners were apparently conducting covert operations within their own initiative. We need more information before confronting Methrex, Telex decided. Jorvis, expand your monitoring. Track exactly what's being diverted and where it might be going. Sella, use your diplomatic contacts to discreetly assess whether any unusual technological signals have been detected near Haven or other known Droo locations. And if we confirm unauthorized activities? Manthe asked. Then we reassess our partnership parameters, Telex replied, her enhancement lights settling into a resolved pattern. Remember that we initiated this project from a position of strength. We control the Genesis facilities. We can adjust terms if necessary. As the meeting concluded, Telex remained behind, reviewing the resource discrepancy data more carefully. The pattern troubled her, not just for its implications of Droo deception, but for what it revealed about their own oversight. They had become so focused on the technical and diplomatic challenges of resurrection that they had allowed operational security to lapse. A soft chime announced a visitor. Telex secured the data before responding. "Enter," she called. To her surprise, a human stepped into her office, a man she recognized as Commander William Bright, officially assigned as a security liaison for human Grent joint operations in the trade corridor. He was of average height for his species, with a closely cropped military haircut showing touches of gray at the temples and the distinct muscular build and perfect posture that mark career military personnel. "Director Telex," he greeted her, using her official title in the Trade Corridor Administration. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Your assistant mentioned you might have a moment." "Commander Bright," Telex acknowledged, her enhancement lights automatically shifting to a neutral business pattern. "This is unexpected. What can I do for you?" "Just a courtesy visit," Bright explained, settling into the chair across from her without waiting for an invitation, a human directness that still occasionally caught Grent off guard. "We've been noticing increased ship traffic in some of the deeper sectors. Thought I should check if there's anything my team should be aware of." Telex's enhancement lights flickered briefly before she controlled them. His casual mention of deeper sectors clearly referenced areas near where their Droo operations were located. "Standard resource development expansion," she replied smoothly. "The eastern expanse has proven even richer than our initial surveys suggested." "I'm sure it has," Bright agreed with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You Grent always find value where others see only emptiness." As he spoke, Telex noticed something she had overlooked in previous interactions. Behind his diplomatic veneer, Bright carried himself with the unmistakable bearing of a combat veteran. The way he had settled into the chair, always maintaining clear sight lines to both the door and her position, the unconscious scanning of the room for potential threats or surveillance. After a few more minutes of innocuous conversation about trade corridor operations, Bright rose to leave. "Well, I won't take any more of your time," he said. "Just wanted to maintain our open lines of communication. These frontier regions can be unpredictable." "Indeed," Telex agreed, rising from her chair. "The Grent Trading Council values our partnership with humanity. Clear communication is essential for mutual profit." Bright nodded, then paused at the doorway. "One more thing. We've been seeing an unusual number of human visitors requesting extended stays in the trade corridor lately. Might want to keep your security protocols updated." "Thank you for the advice, Commander. We'll remain vigilant." Bright studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, without further explanation, he departed. 3 months later, after extensive monitoring had confirmed the Droo's systematic resource diversions and unauthorized operations, Telex and her team convened a confrontation meeting with Methrex. The evidence was irrefutable. The cybernetic Droo had been siphoning materials for weapons development while accepting the Grent's generous assistance with resurrection. "Your deception threatens everything we've built," Telex said, her voice modulator unable to completely hide her anger as she presented the evidence. "If humans discovered weapons development associated with Droo resurrection, they would respond with immediate military action. A necessary precaution given our vulnerable position," Methrex explained dismissively. "While we value our partnership with the Grent, history has taught us the danger of depending entirely on others for our survival." The discussion continued for hours, growing increasingly tense as the full extent of the Droo's covert operations became clear. Not only had they diverted resources, but they had established independent facilities beyond Grent knowledge or control, effectively using the trade corridor as cover for rebuilding their military capabilities. "This violates the foundation of our agreement," Jorvis stated flatly. "We risked everything to help resurrect your species, not to facilitate a military resurgence." "You see threats where there is only prudence," Methrex countered. "These measures are purely defensive, insurance against a galaxy that once tried to exterminate us." By the meeting's end, it was clear that the partnership had fundamentally changed. The Droo would continue to cooperate with the Resurrection program, but their independent operations would also continue. The Grant could accept this new reality or withdraw their support entirely. As Telex and her team left the secure meeting room, they found Commander Bright waiting in the corridor. His presence there, in a section of the trade corridor not normally frequented by humans, was both surprising and concerning. "Director Telex," he greeted her with a nod. "Productive meeting?" Telex's enhancement lights cycled through carefully neutral patterns. "Commander Bright, you're far from the usual human sections of the hub." "Just familiarizing myself with the facility layout," he replied casually, though his eyes studied them intently. "Part of my security duties." Something in his manner suggested more knowledge than he should possess, as if he was fully aware of who they had been meeting with and why. As they prepared to continue past him, Bright spoke again, his voice low enough that only they could hear. "Old habits die hard. Watch your backs." The cryptic warning hung in the air as he walked away, leaving the Grent traders frozen in momentary shock. The implications were clear. Bright knew about their dealings with the Droo and was warning them about their partner's true nature. Back in Telex's secure office, the team processed the disturbing encounter. "Knows," Sella stated flatly. "The humans are aware of our Droo operations." "Not just aware," Monthi added, her historical databases correlating the evidence. "His warning suggests detailed knowledge of Droo behavioral patterns. Old habits die hard clearly references their historical tendency toward deception and conquest. Why warn us?" Jorvis wondered. "If human intelligence has identified our operation, why not take direct action?" "Because they're watching," Telex realized, her enhancement light cycling through analysis patterns. "They're observing how the situation develops. Bright didn't just happen to be in that corridor. He was positioned there deliberately, waiting to deliver that message." The increased human presence in the corridor, noted. Wright mentioned it before. They're not just visitors, they're observers. Intelligence operatives, military personnel, all disguised as researchers and cultural exchange participants. We've been permitted to continue, Telex concluded, for now. But Bright warning suggests the humans see a threat we've underestimated. The Droo aren't just building defenses, they're preparing for something more. Am's ancient eyes seem to look beyond the present moment. History repeats itself. The Droo begin with deception, then move to advantage, and finally to dominance. It was their pattern before the war, and it appears their cybernetic evolution hasn't altered their fundamental nature. What do we do? Jorvis asked. Terminate the partnership? Alert the humans to the full extent of Droo activities? Neither yet, Telex decided. We maintain the resurrection program but enhance our monitoring of Droo operations. We accelerate our contingency planning in case rapid disengagement becomes necessary. And we reevaluate everything Methrex has told us about their population, capabilities, and intentions. As they dispersed to implement these measures, Telex remained alone in her office, reviewing Bright warning again in her mind. The humans, with their long history of conflict with the Droo, had recognized patterns that the Grent had missed. For all their trading acumen and diplomatic skill, they had allowed themselves to be manipulated by partners who saw cooperation merely as a path to advantage. Old habits die hard, she murmured to the empty room. Indeed they do. 3 days after Commander William Bright's cryptic warning in the corridor, Telex found herself deeply immersed in reviewing the security protocols throughout their Droo operations. The resource diversions they had discovered were even more extensive than initially assessed, and the implications of Bright's warning, "Old habits die hard," continued to haunt her processing cycles. Her communication implant chimed with a priority message. Director Telex, Commander William Bright is requesting a private meeting, her assistant informed her. He's returned to the station and claims this is a matter of special importance. Telex's enhancement lights flickered with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Their last encounter had been brief but profoundly disturbing. What more could the human security officer want? Schedule it immediately, she decided. Use reception chamber 6. The chamber was one of their most secure spaces, regularly swept for surveillance devices and shielded against all known forms of monitoring. When Telex arrived, she found Bright already waiting, standing rather than sitting, his posture reflecting the military discipline evident in his bearing. Unlike their previous encounter, he wore what appeared to be casual human attire rather than his official uniform. A subtle but significant change. Director Telex, he greeted her with a formal nod. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Commander Bright, she acknowledged, her enhancement lights cycling to a deliberately neutral pattern. Your request indicated urgency. Not urgency precisely, he replied, gesturing toward the seating area, but certainly importance. Once they were seated, Bright leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. Director, your position carries tremendous responsibility. The trade corridor represents not just a commercial enterprise but a nexus of civilizations. Decisions made here ripple throughout the galaxy. Such influence requires perpetual caution, particularly regarding those you choose to partner with. Telex's enhancement lights flickered briefly before stabilizing. His reference to partners was clearly about the Droo, though he continued to avoid explicit mention of them. The Grent Trading Council has always emphasized thorough evaluation of all commercial relationships, she replied carefully. Risk assessment is fundamental to profitable exchange. Indeed, Bright agreed with a slight smile. Though sometimes even the most sophisticated risk analysis can benefit from additional, historical context. He paused, then abruptly changed direction. Tell me, Director, are you familiar with a human cultural practice called movie night? The sudden shift caught Telex off guard, her enhancement lights cycling through confusion patterns before she could modulate them. I have some passing familiarity with human entertainment customs, a communal viewing of visual narratives, I believe. Precisely, Bright confirmed. An ancient tradition dating back to our pre-space civilization, friends, families, colleagues gathering to watch stories together, sometimes for entertainment, sometimes for education. The shared experience creates common understanding. Telex noticed he had brought a metallic container with him, which he now placed on the table between them. I thought perhaps you and your team might appreciate experiencing this human tradition. While I appreciate the cultural exchange opportunity, Telex began cautiously, our current operational schedule is quite demanding. This isn't just any collection of films, Bright interrupted gently, opening the container to reveal several rectangular objects nestled in protective casing. These are what we call VCR tapes, an antiquated but remarkably secure storage medium from our history. He removed one of the objects, holding it up for her examination. Despite its seemingly primitive appearance, Telex's enhanced perception detected sophisticated quantum shielding embedded within its structure. Curious technology, she observed. Deliberately archaic in appearance, yet incorporating advanced protection measures. Sometimes old methods offer unique advantages, Bright replied with a knowing look. These particular tapes can only be viewed on specific equipment, which I've included, of course, and leave no digital signature that could be detected by monitoring systems. Telex enhancement lights pulsed with understanding. Whatever these recordings contained, Bright was ensuring they couldn't be intercepted by Droo's surveillance. The primitive appearance was deliberate camouflage for a highly secure communication method. These records contain historical documentaries of significant interest, Bright continued, closing the container and sliding it toward her. I believe you'll find the content illuminating regarding certain ongoing situations. And you're providing these for educational purposes? Telex asked carefully. Let's call it a mutual investment in galactic stability, Bright answered. I find that understanding history helps clarify present circumstances and future probabilities. He rose, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join you for this movie night. Other duties require my attention, but I believe you'll find the content self-explanatory. As he prepared to leave, his expression grew serious. Recommendation Director, view these in a location completely isolated from all networked systems. Some historical records can be controversial when viewed from certain perspectives. Telex's enhancement lights pulsed with acknowledgement. Thank you for this cultural offering, Commander. The Grent Trading Council values such exchanges. Indeed, Bright agreed, moving toward the door. Understanding is the foundation of wise decision-making, especially when the stakes involve more than mere commercial profit. At the threshold, he paused. Director Telex, humans have an ancient saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. I believe your species has a similar concept regarding historical trading patterns. We do, Telex confirmed. History's ledger balances all accounts eventually. Precisely, Bright nodded. I hope these records help ensure your current ledgers remain favorably balanced. After he departed, Telex studied the container of VCR tapes, her enhancement lights cycling through analysis patterns. The human's purpose had been clear despite his careful phrasing. This was intelligence being shared through an unofficial, deniable channel. She activated her secure communication implant. Jervis Selimenti, prepare. Isolation Chamber 3 for immediate use. Ensure it's completely disconnected from all networks. And inform we have received a cultural offering from our human associates. Isolation Chamber 3 was a specialized facility within the Trade Corridor's administrative core, designed for examining potentially dangerous materials or technology. Completely disconnected from all networked systems, magnetically shielded, and powered by an independent energy source, it provided perfect security for viewing whatever the mysterious tapes contained. Jervis examined the playback equipment with fascination, his technical enhancements analyzing its construction. Remarkable combination of primitive and advanced technology. The exterior presents as antiquated human design, but the internal components incorporate quantum shielding and neural interface adapters compatible with our enhancement systems. Can you make it functional? Telex asked. Already configured, Jervis confirmed. connecting the device to a large viewing screen. I've calibrated the output for our visual receptors. The original human format would appear quite crude to our perception systems. Studied the collection of tapes, his ancient eyes thoughtful. The humans are sharing intelligence through unofficial channels, significant given their usual protocols. They could have simply confronted us with their knowledge of our Droo operations, Monty noted. This approach suggests other motivations. Perhaps the evidence isn't conclusive, Sella suggested, or perhaps official acknowledgement would require actions their leadership isn't prepared to take. Let's find out exactly what they know, Telex decided. Jorvis, begin playback of the first tape. The screen flickered to life, displaying what appeared to be classified human military footage. Date stamps indicated recordings from various periods, some from the original Droo human war, others clearly recent. The contrast was jarring. Ancient, grainy footage of massive Droo battleships alongside modern high-resolution surveillance showing the hidden activities of the cybernetic Droo. For the next 4 hours, the Grent traders watched in stunned silence as the tapes revealed a comprehensive record of their partner's deception. The evidence was methodical and damning. Surveillance footage showed cybernetic Droo vessels using the trade corridor's shipping lanes as cover for transporting materials to hidden construction facilities beyond the galactic rim. Recordings captured Droo agents infiltrating human research installations to steal technological data, their cybernetic components temporarily deactivated or disguised. Most disturbing were intercepted communications between Methrex and other Droo leaders, explicitly discussing their use of the Grent resurrection program as a distraction while they rebuilt their military capabilities. The Grents serve their purpose, Methrex could be heard saying. They believe themselves to be guiding our resurrection while we prepare for true restoration. Telex's enhancement lights dimmed with shock and anger as the evidence mounted. The Droo hadn't merely diverted some resources. They had systematically exploited the entire trade corridor initiative as cover for rebuilding their civilization as a military power. The final tape revealed the most disturbing information. The cybernetic Droo population wasn't the 237 individuals Methrex had claimed. Beyond the galactic rim, a fleet of generation ships housed over 20,000 cybernetic Droo, a civilization in exile that had been gradually rebuilding their numbers and technology while waiting for the opportunity to reclaim their place in the galaxy. As the last recording ended, the screen displayed a simple text message against a black background. Old habits die hard. Act accordingly. The Grent traders sat in stunned silence, processing the implications of what they had witnessed. Their enhancement lights cycled through patterns of shock, anger, and deep concern. "They've manipulated us from the beginning," Sella finally said, her diplomatic enhancements struggling to reconcile the calculated deception with the partnership they thought they had established. "Not just manipulated," Jorvis added, his technical enhancements still analyzing the footage. "Used us as unwitting accomplices in rebuilding a military threat that could engulf the entire galaxy." Manthi's historical databases had been correlating patterns throughout the viewing. The parallels to their pre-war expansion are unmistakable. First, establish presence through seemingly peaceful means, then build military capability in secret, finally launch coordinated offensives once sufficient advantage has been secured. "We were warned," Telex said quietly. "Commander Bright's message in the corridor makes perfect sense now. Old habits die hard. The Droo haven't abandoned their expansionist philosophy, they've merely adapted their approach." Who had watched the recordings with the grim recognition of one who had seen such patterns before, finally spoke. "The question now is not whether we've been deceived, but what we do with this knowledge. The humans have shared this intelligence without making demands. They're allowing us to make our own decisions." Why, Sella wondered. If they have this much evidence, why not take direct action against the Droo? "Because open military action risks galactic war," explained, "and because our position gives us options humans don't have. We've been the unwitting facilitators of Droo deception. We can become the architects of its unraveling." Telex's enhancement lights settled into decision patterns. We need to extricate ourselves from this partnership without alerting the Droo to our knowledge. If they realize we've been warned, they might accelerate whatever timetable they're operating on. Agreed, Jorvis said. We should begin by securing our most sensitive operations against Droo access. The neural linkage systems they've installed have likely been serving as intelligence-gathering tools. And the resurrection program itself? Matthey asked. Thousands of embryonic Droo are in development. Do we continue their cultivation knowing what we now know about their species' intentions? This question silenced the room. For all their anger at being deceived, the Grent traders had genuinely committed to the concept of species preservation. The embryonic Droo were innocent of their cybernetic progenitors' deception. We continue the program, Telex decided finally. But with modifications, we adjust the educational frameworks to emphasize cooperation rather than conquest. We raise this generation with values that might break the cycle of aggression their species has followed for millennia. And if the cybernetic Droo object to our changes? Sela asked. Then their objections will reveal their true intentions more openly, Telex replied, forcing them to either accept our approach or expose their agenda to broader galactic scrutiny. Nodded slowly, his ancient eyes showing approval of his former student's strategy. A classic trading approach. Create a situation where your counterpart must either accept your terms or reveal their dishonesty. What about the humans? Jorvis asked. Should we acknowledge receipt of this intelligence? Yes, Telex decided, but carefully. They took a significant risk sharing this information. They deserve to know we've understood its importance. How? Sela wondered. Any direct communication might be monitored. Telex considered the problem, then her enhancement lights pulsed with inspiration. We'll use their method, a cultural exchange requiring no words. Jorvis, do we have examples of ancient Grent data storage systems in our historical archives? Several, Jorvis confirmed, including memory crystals from our pre-enhancement era. They require specific resonance frequencies to access, making them similarly secure against remote interception. Perfect, Telex decided. Prepare one with a simple acknowledgement, then arrange for it to be delivered to Commander Bright as a reciprocal cultural exchange. As they prepared to leave the isolation chamber, paused beside the viewing equipment, his enhancement lights cycling through patterns of deep contemplation. Something troubles you, teacher? Telex inquired. I'm considering the human approach to this situation, replied. They could have simply confronted us with accusations. Instead, they chose to show us the evidence and allow us to reach our own conclusions. It demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of Grent's psychology and a respect for our agency that the Droo have never shown. You think we should ally more closely with humanity against the Droo threat? Telex asked. I think we should recognize genuine partnership when we see it, corrected gently. The humans could have viewed us as either dupes or collaborators in Droo deception. Instead, they've treated us as equals, capable of correcting course when presented with new information. Telex enhancement lights pulsed with agreement as they secured the isolation chamber. The Grent initiative had begun as a project to resurrect an extinct species. It had evolved into something far more complex, a front line in a silent conflict that might determine the galaxy's future. But now, at least, they understood which side they needed to be on. 2 days later, Commander William Bright received a small package from the Grent Trading Council, officially listed as a cultural exchange artifact in the manifest. Inside was what appeared to be an ancient crystalline device, accompanied by a formal note describing it as a historical data storage medium from early Grent trading eras, shared in appreciation for recent human cultural offerings. In the privacy of his secure quarters aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Bright examined the crystal with approval. The Grent had received his message and responded in kind, a secure, deniable acknowledgement that required no explicit statement. A specialized scanner revealed the crystal's contents, a single image showing a Grent trading contract with specific clauses highlighted. To most observers, it would appear to be a simple example of traditional Grent commercial documentation. But Bright, with his extensive knowledge of Grent culture, recognized the specific contract type, one historically used when dissolving partnerships with deceptive traders. "Message received," he murmured with satisfaction. His secure communication device chimed with an incoming call from Earth Command. He activated the channel to find Admiral Marshner waiting on the other end. "Report, Commander," the Admiral requested without preamble. "Intelligence package delivered and received, sir," Bright confirmed. "The Grent have acknowledged in their typically subtle fashion. Based on their response, I believe they'll take appropriate action." "Good," Marshner nodded. "The last thing we need is another full-scale Droo conflict. If the Grent can help contain this situation without overt military action, it saves lives on all sides." "They seem genuinely unaware of the extent of Droo deception, sir," Bright noted. "I don't believe they were willing participants, just overly optimistic about their partner's transformation." "A common mistake when dealing with the Droo," Marshner replied grimly. "Their ability to present exactly what their counterparts want to see has always been their most dangerous weapon." "What's our next move, sir?" Bright asked. "Maintain current positioning, but take no overt action," the Admiral instructed. "Continue the fiction that our increased presence relates to trade corridor security cooperation. Let the Grent make the first move against their Droo partners." As the communication ended, Bright turned the crystal thoughtfully in his hand. The Grent had a reputation throughout the galaxy as the ultimate pragmatic traders, always seeking the profitable middle ground, always finding the path of mutual advantage. That approach had led them to attempt resurrecting one of the most dangerous species in galactic history. Now they faced the consequences of that miscalculation. How they handled it would reveal much about their true character as a species. Meanwhile, aboard the main trade corridor hub, Telex convened a secure meeting with her team to implement their response to the Droo deception. The ancient chamber they gathered in predated even their cybernetic enhancements, its stone walls naturally resistant to all forms of electronic surveillance. "We'll proceed in precise phases," Telex announced, her enhancement lights cycling through strategic patterns. "First, secure all our systems against further Droo intelligence gathering. Jorvis, neutralize the neural linkage networks without alerting them to our awareness." "Already in progress," Jorvis confirmed. "I've implemented a cascading series of technical malfunctions that will gradually degrade their access without appearing deliberate. Within 5 days, their monitoring capabilities will be completely neutralized." "Second," Telex continued, "we modify the Resurrection Program's educational frameworks. Manthe, prepare a complete revision that emphasizes galactic cooperation while preserving authentic Droo cultural elements." "The revisions are prepared," Manthe reported. "I've structured them to appear as natural evolutionary improvements rather than fundamental redirections. The cybernetic Droo will detect the changes, but they'll be subtle enough to avoid immediate confrontation." "Finally," Telex concluded, "we begin contingency planning for complete disengagement if necessary. Sella, work with to develop diplomatic frameworks for various scenarios, ranging from managed partnership dissolution to emergency containment protocols." "There's another factor we should consider," interjected quietly, "the embryonic Droo themselves. They're being cultured with genetic profiles designed by the cybernetic Droo, profiles that may include predispositions toward the very behaviors we're trying to modify through education." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. If the Droo had encoded their aggressive tendencies into the genetic structure of the resurrected generation, even the most carefully designed educational frameworks might prove insufficient. "Can we modify the genetic sequences at this stage?" Telex asked. Jorvis's enhancement lights cycled through analysis patterns. "Theoretically, yes. The development chambers include gene editing capabilities intended for correcting abnormalities. We could repurpose those systems to subtly adjust specific neural development pathways, not enough to fundamentally alter Droo identity, but potentially sufficient to enhance receptivity to cooperative rather than competitive social structures. That crosses into ethically complex territory," Manthea warned. Genetic modification of sentient species without consent has profound implications, as does unleashing a potentially aggressive species into a galaxy that's known peace for nearly a century, Sella countered. We must balance multiple ethical considerations. Telex's enhancement lights dimmed as she processed the difficult choice before them. Implement minimal modifications, she decided finally. Focus only on pathways directly linked to aggressive impulse control and empathic response. Document everything meticulously. If questioned, we'll be transparent about our reasoning. The Droo deserved a genuine opportunity to evolve beyond their historical patterns. As the meeting concluded, Telex remained behind with her enhancement lights cycling through troubled patterns. "Have we exceeded our mandate, teacher?" she asked quietly. First resurrection, now genetic modification. These decisions affect multiple civilizations, not just trading margins. Am's ancient eyes studied her with the wisdom of centuries. The greatest traders in Grent history understood that true value extends beyond immediate profit. They built networks that stabilized entire sectors, fostered civilizational development, created foundations for mutual prosperity. The Droo see the galaxy as territory to be conquered. The humans see it as territory to be defended. But we, Grent, have always understood it as a marketplace, a complex network of relationships and exchanges that function best when balanced between all participants. His enhancement light settled into a pattern of certainty. By working to ensure the resurrected Droo can participate in that marketplace without destroying it, we fulfill our species' highest purpose, not merely accumulating wealth, but creating the conditions for its continued creation. Telex's enhancement light synchronized with his, accepting the wisdom in his perspective. "For the good of galactic trade," she recited the ancient Grent motto. "And for something more," added softly, "for the possibility of genuine transformation, not just for the Droo but for all of us who share this galaxy." As they parted ways, each to their assigned tasks in the delicate operation now unfolding, Telex carried that thought with her. What had begun as a simple trade initiative had evolved into something far more profound, a struggle not just for profit or security, but for the very nature of galactic civilization itself. And in that struggle, the Grent would need to be not merely traders, but visionaries. Within days of implementing the subtle changes to the resurrection program, Telex received an urgent communication request from Methrex. The Droo leader's transmission came through an encrypted channel normally reserved for emergencies, bypassing standard protocols. When Telex accepted the connection in her secure office, Methrex's image appeared, his cybernetic components pulsing with patterns she had never seen before, rhythms that her enhancement systems instinctively registered as threatening. "You have altered the educational frameworks," Methrex stated without preamble, his synthetic voice carrying an unfamiliar edge, "and you've introduced modifications to the neural development pathways of the embryonic specimens. Explain these unauthorized changes." Telex's enhancement lights cycled through calm, diplomatic patterns despite her internal alarm. The Droo had detected their adjustments far more quickly than anticipated. "We've made refinements to optimize integration potential," she replied evenly. "The modifications are minimal, merely enhancements to ensure successful adaptation to contemporary galactic society." "Deception does not suit you, Trader Telex." Metherac's sensor arrays focused with unnerving intensity. "The changes systematically suppress core Droo behavioral patterns while amplifying traits that align with your species' preferences. This constitutes unauthorized genetic manipulation of our people. The adjustments address developmental instabilities we've identified," Telex countered, maintaining her professional demeanor. "They're well within the parameters of our agreement, which grants us operational discretion over technical aspects of the resurrection process." Metrex's mechanical appendages made a sharp, dismissive gesture. "Your discretion does not extend to rewriting our species' fundamental nature. You were entrusted with restoration, not redesign." "Perhaps we should discuss these concerns with the full project team," Telex suggested. Technical decisions of this nature benefit from collaborative. There is nothing to discuss, Mithrax interrupted, his synthetic voice hardening. You will immediately reverse all genetic modifications and restore the original educational frameworks. Any further unauthorized alterations will be considered a hostile act against the Droo civilization. Telex's enhancement lights flickered briefly before settling into a resolved pattern. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mithrax. Our analysis indicates the current protocols provide optimal developmental outcomes. Reverting to previous parameters would introduce unnecessary risks. For a moment, the cybernetic Droo went unnaturally still, his sensor arrays dimming as if processing internal communications. When they brightened again, there was something different in their pattern. A coldness that hadn't been present before. You disappoint me, Telex, Mithrax said finally. I had hoped the Grent would prove more reliable partners than historical evidence suggested. It seems I was mistaken. Partners share information openly, Telex replied, deciding to test how much Mithrax knew of their discoveries. They don't divert resources to unauthorized facilities or conceal the true scope of their operations. If Mithrax was surprised by her implied knowledge, he showed no sign of it. Pragmatic contingency planning is not deception, Trader Telex. It's simple survival strategy. And your other facilities? Telex pressed. The ones producing Droo far beyond the numbers you disclosed to us? This time, Mithrax sensor arrays pulsed in what might have been satisfaction. So, the humans have shared their intelligence with you. I wondered how long it would take them to make that move. You don't deny it, then? Why should I? Mithrax's synthetic voice carried a note of what sounded almost like pride. Our primary Genesis facilities came online 3 standard years ago. While you've been carefully nurturing thousands, we've already successfully cultivated millions of improved Droo. Your contribution, while appreciated, was always supplementary to our main restoration program. The casual revelation stunned Telex into momentary silence, her enhancement lights cycling rapidly as she processed its implications. The situation was far worse than even the human intelligence had indicated. You used us, she finally said. Our resources, our diplomatic cover, our technology, all while conducting your main operation elsewhere. We engaged in mutually beneficial exchange, Mithrax corrected. You received unprecedented access to Droo technology and knowledge. We received assistance with a secondary project while our primary work continued unimpeded. Both parties profited according to their capabilities. Except you misrepresented the terms of that exchange, Telex countered. A legitimate trade partnership requires transparency regarding material factors. A curious ethical position from a species that concealed our existence from your own council, Mithrax observed. Selective transparency seems to be a universal trait. Before Telex could respond, the communication panel chimed with multiple emergency alerts. Jorvis's voice came through her private channel, tense and urgent. Telex, we're detecting massive energy surges at all Droo-connected facilities. They're overriding our security protocols and taking control of critical systems. This isn't a negotiation, it's a coordinated attack. Telex's enhancement lights flared with alarm as she returned her attention to Mithrax. What are you doing? Your people are violating our security systems across the network. Securing our investment, Mithrax replied calmly. The embryonic Droo remain our genetic heritage. If you won't honor our partnership as agreed, we will reclaim what is ours. Stand down your operatives immediately, Telex demanded. This action violates every protocol of our agreement and galactic law. Your laws don't apply to us, Trader Telex. The galaxy decreed our extinction. We owe its institutions nothing. Mithrax's mechanical appendages made a dismissive gesture. Consider this the natural conclusion of a partnership that no longer serves its purpose. The communication terminated abruptly, leaving Telex facing a blank screen as the emergency alerts continued to multiply across her systems. She immediately activated the station-wide security protocols and opened a channel to her team. Full containment procedures at all resurrection facilities, she ordered. Priority 1 is protecting our personnel. Alert the Trade Council. This is now a security crisis requiring official intervention. Throughout the trade corridor network, chaos erupted as hidden Droo operatives activated emergency protocols embedded deep within their neural linkage systems. Security barriers failed, transportation systems locked down, and communication networks scrambled as the cybernetic Droo executed what was clearly a long-planned extraction operation. At the main Genesis facility, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Grent medical technicians found themselves locked out of critical systems as the environmental controls shifted to settings lethal to their biology but optimal for Droo physiology. Those who couldn't evacuate immediately collapsed as the atmospheric composition changed, their enhancement systems unable to compensate for the sudden shift. Jorvis, who had been inspecting the facility when the attack began, barely managed to seal himself in a maintenance chamber with a small group of technicians. "They're taking the embryos," he reported through the emergency channel, his voice distorted by interference. "Specialized transport units we've never seen before. They're removing the entire development chambers intact." "What about the facility staff?" Telex demanded. A long pause preceded Jorvis's grim response. "The Droo are not taking prisoners, Telex. Anyone they encounter is being terminated. Efficiently and without hesitation." The cold calculation of it struck Telex with sickening clarity. The Droo had never intended a peaceful dissolution of their partnership, only a surgical extraction of what they valued, with no witnesses left behind. Within hours, the Trade Council convened an emergency session as reports flooded in from across the corridor. Dozens of Grent dead, critical infrastructure compromised, and every trace of the resurrection program, embryos, equipment, and data, systematically removed or destroyed. The Eldeth's ancient cybernetics hummed with barely contained fury as she addressed the assembled council. "This unprovoked attack constitutes an act of war against the Grent Trading Authority. For the first time in 7 centuries, I am invoking Emergency Protocol Alpha, full military mobilization and immediate diplomatic notification to all allied species." Telex, summoned to present a first-hand account of the Droo betrayal, stood before the council with her enhancement lights dimmed in formal mourning for the lost Grent lives. "The cybernetic Droo have revealed their true nature," she concluded after detailing the day's events. "What we witnessed was not an impulsive reaction but the execution of a long-prepared contingency plan. They used our initiative as cover while building their own civilization in secret, and now that we've outlived our usefulness, they've discarded us with calculated violence." "And the humans?" the eldest inquired. "Their intelligence services apparently knew more about Droo activities than we did." "What is their position?" "Uncertain," Telex admitted. "They shared critical information with us, but we've had no direct communication since the attack began. Their vessels remain in position throughout the corridor but have taken no action yet." The eldest's enhancement lights cycled through ancient decision patterns, rarely seen in modern Grent society. "Prepare our defense fleet. All trade vessels with adequate shielding are to be retrofitted for potential military action. We will not seek conflict, but neither will we allow this aggression to stand unanswered." As the council session concluded, alerts sounded throughout the chamber. The primary monitoring station reported massive spatial distortions at the edge of the trade corridor, the unmistakable signature of multiple vessels exiting FTL travel simultaneously. The tactical display activated automatically, showing a formation of ships unlike anything in current galactic registries. Sleek, predatory designs combining organic and mechanical elements, their hulls gleaming with a metallic sheen that seemed to absorb rather than reflect surrounding light. At the center of the formation loomed a massive command vessel, its size dwarfing even the largest Grent trading carriers. "Droo warships," identified them, his ancient eyes narrowing, "similar to their conquest fleet from the war, but significantly advanced. They've been building this force for decades." The eldest rose from her ceremonial platform, her enhancement lights pulsing with the formal pattern of Grent military authority, a configuration not used since the last great trading war centuries earlier. "So, it begins again," she said softly. "The Droo return to claim what they believe is theirs. And once again the galaxy must decide whether to stand against them or fall, one civilization at a time." The massive Droo fleet held position at the edge of the trade corridor, neither advancing nor communicating, simply present, an unmistakable statement of power and intent. The message was clear. The time for hidden partnerships had ended. The Droo had emerged from the shadows, and the galaxy would soon be forced to acknowledge their return. The Grent defense fleet assembled with remarkable speed, a testament to centuries of trading efficiency, now turned to military purpose. What they lacked in warships, they compensated for with numbers. Hundreds of trading vessels hastily retrofitted with shield enhancements and weapon systems pulled from deep storage facilities where they had rested since the last trading war. On the bridge of the profitable exchange, now designated as a rescue and recovery vessel, Telex watched as the improvised armada prepared to move out. Her enhancement lights pulsed with determination even as tactical analyses scrolling through her neural interface showed the stark reality they faced. Their fleet was outmatched by the Droo warships in every measurable category. "The Council has formally approved our mission parameters," she informed her bridge crew, a mixture of traders and security personnel with limited military experience. "We advance under diplomatic protocols, stating our intention to secure our trade routes and recover personnel from the Genesis facility. No aggressive actions unless directly attacked." Who had insisted on joining the mission despite his age, studied the tactical display with ancient eyes that had seen too many conflicts. "The Droo will interpret any approach as a threat. They understand nothing but dominance and submission." "Perhaps," Telex acknowledged. "But we must establish clear boundaries before galactic witnesses. If conflict escalates, the record will show we sought peaceful resolution first." "Political positioning for the battles that follow this one," noted grimly. "Wise, if potentially costly." The fleet's formation took shape, a standard Grent trading convoy configuration modified for greater defensive coverage. The profitable exchange positioned itself near the center, close to the larger vessels designated for evacuating any survivors from the Genesis facility. "Any word from Jorvis?" Telex asked, her enhancement lights dimming slightly at the thought of her colleague trapped in the facility now controlled by hostile Droo forces. "Brief transmission 17 minutes ago," Sella reported from the communications station. He and 11 others remain barricaded in a maintenance section with independent life support. Droo forces have attempted to breach their position twice, but were repelled by emergency security measures. "Then there's still time." Telex's enhancement lights brightened with renewed purpose. "All vessels, prepare for coordinated advance. Remember, we move with purpose but without provocation. Our objective is rescue, not engagement." The Grent fleet began its deliberate approach toward the massive Droo warships, still holding position at the edge of the trade corridor. As they advanced, Telex authorized a system-wide transmission, broadcast on all standard frequencies and in Droo communication protocols. "Attention, Droo vessels. This is Director Telex of the Grent Trading Authority. We are proceeding to recover our personnel and secure our established trade routes. We have no hostile intent. Any interference with these legitimate activities will be considered a violation of galactic commercial law and responded to accordingly." No response came from the Droo fleet, neither acknowledgement nor warning. They remained ominously silent, their massive vessels simply tracking the Grent approach with sophisticated sensor arrays visible even at this distance. "They are scanning us," reported the sensor officer, his enhancement lights flickering with nervous energy. "Multiple targeting systems active and locked on our formation." "Maintain course and speed," Telex ordered calmly. "All vessels keep defensive systems on standby only, no aggressive posture." As they closed the distance, the imposing scale of the Droo warships became increasingly apparent. The lead vessel alone dwarfed the entire central section of the Grent fleet, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements that hummed with barely contained energy. "Director," Sella called urgently from communications, "we're receiving a transmission from the Genesis facility. It's Jorvis." "Put it through," Telex ordered immediately. Jorvis's voice came through distorted and interrupted by static, but the urgency was unmistakable. "Massive activity removing final systems. Heard them say, demonstration of resolve. Believe they're planning to... The transmission cut off abruptly as a blinding flash erupted from the direction of the Genesis facility. The tactical display flared with warnings as sensors registered an enormous energy surge, followed by rapidly expanding debris. The facility, the sensor officer reported in horror. It's gone. Complete structural failure. No life signs detected in the vicinity. A stunned silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. The Droo hadn't just taken what they wanted from the facility. They had deliberately destroyed it, along with anyone still inside. Jorvis and the others, trapped in their maintenance shelter, had no chance of survival. Talex's enhancement lights cycled through morning patterns before settling into a cold, focused configuration. They executed our people to send a message, to demonstrate their resolve, and to eliminate witnesses, added grimly. Standard Droo tactics, leave no one to testify about their methods or capabilities. Before Telex could respond, the sensor officer called out in alarm. Energy buildup detected across the Droo fleet. Their weapon systems are activating. All vessels, raise shields, Telex ordered immediately. Prepare for defensive maneuvers, but hold fire. I repeat, hold fire unless directly... Her command was cut short as the lead Droo warship unleashed a blinding beam of energy that sliced through the shields of 3 Grent vessels in rapid succession, vaporizing them instantly. Within seconds, the entire Droo fleet opened fire, a coordinated barrage that tore through the hastily assembled Grent defenses with devastating efficiency. They waited until we were committed, observed with grim recognition. Too close to retreat, too unprepared to effectively defend, a classic Droo entrapment strategy. The bridge erupted in frantic activity as damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Shields failing, engines disabled, weapon systems offline. The Grent vessels, designed primarily for trade rather than combat, were being systematically dismantled by the superior Droo technology. We have no choice, Telex declared, her enhancement lights pulsing with resolved pattern. All vessels, return fire with all available weapons. Target their propulsion and weapon systems. This is no longer a rescue mission, it's a fight for survival. The remaining Grent ships responded with a barrage of their own antiquated but still potent energy weapons and destabilization fields awakened from centuries of disuse. Their fire seemed almost pitiful against the massive Droo warships, yet occasionally a well-placed shot would find a vulnerable point, momentarily disrupting a shield or damaging a secondary system. On the profitable exchange, Telex watched the tactical display with growing despair. As Grent vessels disappeared from the formation one by one, their losses were mounting rapidly, while the Droo fleet remained largely intact, the few damages they sustained seeming inconsequential against their overwhelming firepower. A massive impact rocked the ship, throwing several crew members from their stations. Emergency systems wailed as structural integrity warnings flashed across every display. Direct hit to our primary shield generator, reported the damage control officer, his enhancement lights flickering with strain as he interfaced directly with the ship's systems. Secondary shields at 23% and failing. One more direct hit and we're finished. Telex steadied herself against her command station, surveying the chaos around her. The bridge was filled with smoke from overloaded circuits, emergency lighting casting everything in a dim red glow. Through the viewport, she could see the scattered remains of what had been a proud Grent fleet, now reduced to disabled hulks and expanding debris fields. As another Droo energy beam lanced past their bow, narrowly missing them, Telex found herself thinking of Commander Bright's warning. Old habits die hard. How right he had been. The Droo hadn't changed, hadn't evolved beyond their conquering nature. They had merely adapted their approach to the current galactic reality. I should have heeded the warning earlier, she said quietly to who maintained his calm demeanor even as destruction surrounded them. Taken everything to the Council immediately when we first suspected deception. Now they've grown too powerful to stop. Perhaps, acknowledged, his ancient eyes reflecting the battle raging outside. Or perhaps this confrontation was inevitable, regardless of our actions. The Droo were never going to be content with peaceful coexistence. Their nature demands dominance. The tactical display updated with fresh horror. The massive Droo command vessel was moving into position for a clear shot at the profitable exchange. Its main weapon system, a colossal energy cannon running the length of its forward section, began charging with visible intensity. "They're targeting us specifically," Sella observed, her diplomatic enhancement still analyzing patterns even in what appeared to be their final moments. "They want to eliminate the leadership who know the full extent of their deception." "All power to forward shields," Telex ordered, knowing it would make little difference against such a weapon. "And prepare a final data transmission to the Council. They need to know everything, the full extent of Droo capabilities, their tactics, their true numbers, something to give those who come after us a fighting chance." As the crew rushed to comply, a priority alert sounded from the sensor array. The officer monitoring it looked up in confusion, his enhancement lights cycling through disbelief patterns. "New contacts detected," he reported, "approaching at high velocity from galactic north, hundreds of them, possibly thousands. Configuration unknown, but energy signatures suggest human design." The tactical display shifted to accommodate the new data, showing a massive formation of ships emerging from hyperspace directly behind the Droo fleet. Their appearance was unlike any human vessels Telex had seen before. Sleek, predatory designs with an unmistakable military purpose. They moved with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive combat experience, rapidly forming an encirclement pattern around the surprise Droo warship. Before anyone could react, the lead human vessel broadcast on all frequencies, the message echoing through every ship in both fleets. "Attention Droo forces, this is Admiral Marshner of the United Earth Defense Fleet. You are engaged in unprovoked hostilities against a non-combatant trading authority in violation of galactic treaties. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded, or we will respond with appropriate force." Without waiting for a response, the human fleet opened fire with weapons that made the Droo armaments seem primitive by comparison. Quantum disruption beams that sliced through Droo shields as if they weren't there. Gravitic distortion fields that crushed hull sections without direct impact, and swarms of autonomous combat drones that overwhelmed point defense systems. They were waiting, realized, his enhancement lights pulsing with sudden understanding. The humans knew this confrontation was coming. They allowed it to happen here on their terms with their forces prepared. "Commander Bright's warning," Telex recalled. "It wasn't just information, it was preparation. They needed us to understand the threat so we would act, drawing the Droo into the open where they could be engaged directly." On the tactical display, the battle's tide turned with shocking rapidity. The Droo warships, caught between the remnants of the Grent fleet and the overwhelming human force, attempted to regroup for a counterattack. But the human vessels moved with uncanny coordination, anticipating Droo tactics and neutralizing their advantages one by one. "They've studied Droo warfare," Sella observed. "These aren't standard human battle patterns. They're specifically designed to counter Droo strategies. They've been preparing for this for decades." As the Droo command vessel attempted to bring its main weapon to bear on the human flagship, a concentrated barrage from multiple human destroyers overwhelmed its shields. Precision strikes followed, targeting vital systems with surgical accuracy. Within moments, the massive warship's engines flared and died, leaving it drifting powerless as human boarding craft approached its hull. Throughout the engagement zone, similar scenes played out as Droo vessels found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned by the human fleet that seemed to have anticipated their every move. Some attempted to retreat, only to find their hyperspace capabilities neutralized by specialized human interdiction fields. A direct communication request from the human flagship appeared on Telex's command console. When she accepted, Admiral Marshner's image appeared, a stern-faced human with silver-gray hair and the unmistakable bearing of a career military officer. "Director Telex," he greeted her formally, "your fleet fought admirably against overwhelming odds. We're dispatching medical and repair vessels to assist your damaged ships. Please coordinate with our rescue teams to identify critical cases." "Admiral," Telex acknowledged, her enhancement light cycling through diplomatic patterns despite the chaos around her. "Your intervention is timely, though perhaps not entirely unexpected." A ghost of a smile crossed Marshner's face. "Commander Bright spoke highly of your perceptiveness. We regret not being able to act sooner, but we needed the Droo to commit their forces fully. This was our one opportunity to engage their fleet before they could expand further." "You used us as bait," Telex observed, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. "We provided intelligence and allowed you to make your own decisions," Marshner corrected. "The Grent Trading Authority has always valued its independence. We respected that while preparing for the inevitable confrontation." Before Telex could respond, the Admiral continued, his expression growing serious again. "We have much to discuss regarding what comes next. The Droo threat extends far beyond this single fleet. Their facilities beyond the galactic rim will need to be addressed. But for now, let's focus on saving as many of your people as possible." As the communication ended, Telex turned to survey her damaged bridge. Despite everything, they had survived, not through their own strength, but through an alliance they hadn't even known existed. The humans had been preparing for the Droo return all along, watching and waiting for the moment to strike. "It seemed," said quietly beside her, "that some old habits serve a purpose after all." The humans never forgot the Droo threat, never lowered their guard. Perhaps there's wisdom in maintaining certain vigilances across generations. Telex's enhancement lights pulsed with agreement as she watched the human rescue vessels approaching their damaged ship. "For the good of galactic trade," she murmured, the traditional Grent motto taking on new meaning in this context. "And for something more," added, echoing their earlier conversation, "for the possibility of a galaxy where such vigilance might someday become unnecessary." Through the viewport, Telex could see the crippled Droo command vessel being secured by human boarding teams. Their ancient enemy, thought extinct for generations, had emerged once more, and once more faced defeat. But this time the galaxy had been prepared, forewarned by the memories of those who refused to forget the lessons of history. Old habits, it seemed, could sometimes be the difference between survival and extinction. 1 month after the decisive battle at the trade corridor, the Grent were still coming to terms with how drastically their position in the galaxy had changed. What had begun as a well-intentioned species restoration project had culminated in open warfare, catastrophic losses, and the revelation of humanity's true military might, a force that had remained hidden until the moment of greatest need. Telex stood at the viewport of her new office aboard Unity Station, a massive joint human Grent facility constructed with remarkable speed at the heart of the former trade corridor. Below, construction drones swarmed around damaged Grent vessels, repairing and upgrading them with technology far beyond what the trading species had previously possessed. Her enhancement light cycled through contemplative patterns as she watched the activity. The Grent had lost 37 ships and nearly 2,000 lives in the Droo attack, yet within a month, most of the damaged infrastructure had been restored, trade routes re-established, and security protocols completely redesigned with human assistance. "Quite a view," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Commander William Bright stood there, now wearing the formal uniform of the United Earth Defense Fleet rather than the casual attire or security liaison garb she had previously seen him in. "Commander Bright," Telex acknowledged, her enhancement lights shifting to a welcoming pattern. "Or should I say fleet captain now? I understand you received a promotion." "William is fine," he replied with an easy smile. "The promotion was merely formal recognition of what was already my actual role. My superiors felt maintaining the cover story was no longer necessary." "Much has changed in a short time," Telex observed, gesturing for him to enter. "Your people work with remarkable efficiency. Most of my species believed it would take years to recover from the Droo attack. Humanity has centuries of experience rebuilding after conflict," William said, joining her at the viewport. "Unfortunately, it's a skill we've had ample opportunity to perfect." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the reconstruction efforts below. Finally, Telex turned to face her human ally directly. The Trading Council meets tomorrow to discuss our formal response to humanity's intervention and the proposed security alliance. I assume you're here to offer perspective? William's expression remained neutral, but his eyes carried a knowing look. Just a friendly conversation between representatives of allied species, nothing official. Of course, Telex agreed, her enhancement lights pulsing with subtle amusement. This diplomatic dance had become familiar over the past weeks, unofficial conversations that somehow always preceded official policy decisions. "How are your people coping with the revelations?" William asked. "Learning that humans have maintained a military capability far beyond what was publicly known must be unsettling." "Less than you might expect," Telex replied thoughtfully. "The Grent have always respected preparation and contingency planning. Many view humanity's hidden fleet as simply good business practice, insurance against future threats." "And the ongoing operations against remaining Droo outposts?" William pressed gently. Telex's enhancement lights dimmed slightly. "More contentious. Some council members believe we should participate more actively in the military campaign. They argue that since we helped inadvertently resurrect the Droo, we bear responsibility for their final containment." William shook his head, his expression turning serious. "If I may offer some friendly advice, the Grent would be wise to focus on what you do best. Rebuilding trade networks, fostering economic growth, creating stability through commerce. Let humanity handle the war. It's what we're unfortunately good at." "You sound like Telex noted. He's been advocating a similar position. "A wise trader indeed," William replied with genuine respect. "The galaxy needs the Grent to be traders and diplomats, not soldiers. Each species has its strengths. Ours happens to include the capacity for sustained military action when necessary." "Is it necessary?" Telex asked quietly. "The complete eradication of the Droo?" William's expression darkened. "The intelligence we've gathered from captured Droo vessels confirms our worst fears. Their primary facilities beyond the Rim have been producing not just millions of Droo, but specialized warrior variants specifically designed for conquest. Their plan was never peaceful coexistence, it was galactic domination." Beginning with the subjugation of humanity, he moved away from the viewport, his posture subtly shifting to a more military bearing. "In human theology, there's a concept called the devil, the ultimate embodiment of evil, a being that exists solely to corrupt, destroy, and dominate. In many ways, the Droo fulfill that role in our collective history. The difference," he continued, "is that while our devil is a spirit that can't be killed, the Droo are flesh and metal. They can and must be stopped permanently. The alternative is unthinkable." Telex enhancement lights cycled through solemn patterns. "I understand the necessity. I witnessed their cruelty firsthand. I just wonder if there might have been another way. If the embryonic Droo we were cultivating might have developed differently, free from their ancestors' aggressive impulses." "A noble thought," William acknowledged, "but one the cybernetic Droo never intended to allow. According to the data we've recovered, the genetic templates they provided included hardwired neural pathways for aggression and dominance. They weren't interested in evolution, only in replication." A chime from Telex's communication system interrupted their conversation. "The preliminary council session is beginning," she noted. "They're discussing the proposed status referendum." "Ah yes, the vote on your relationship with Earth going forward," William said, his tone carefully neutral. "A significant decision for your people." "Indeed," Telex agreed. "Some advocate for full independence, others for a formal alliance, and a growing faction supports integration as an autonomous region within the human sphere." "Whatever the Grent decide," William said as he prepared to leave, "humanity will respect your choice. We value your species too highly to impose terms." As he reached the doorway, he paused. "One last thing, Director Telex. Admiral Marshner asked me to convey his personal gratitude for your role in exposing the Droo threat. Many lives were saved because you chose to act on our warning rather than dismiss it." "We still lost many," Telex replied, her enhancement lights dimming with remembered grief. "Yes," William acknowledged. "But had you not acted when you did, had you not modified those embryos and forced the Droo to reveal themselves prematurely, the losses would have been catastrophic. Entire civilizations might have fallen before we could mobilize an effective response." After he departed, Telex remained at the viewport, watching as a human medical vessel docked with a damaged Drent trader. The efficiency of their cooperation was remarkable. Human technology seamlessly integrating with Grent systems, each species contributing their unique capabilities to the joint effort. Perhaps, she reflected, this was the true strength that the Droo could never comprehend. Not domination, but symbiosis. Different species working together, each according to their nature, creating something greater than any could achieve alone. With that thought providing clarity, she departed for the council chambers, her decision on the upcoming vote now firmly resolved in her mind. The Great Hall of Trade had been reconstructed with impressive speed following the Droo attack, though subtle changes revealed humanity's influence. Enhanced shield generators disguised as architectural elements, sensor arrays integrated into the traditional Grent symbols adorning the walls, and a significantly expanded observation gallery where diplomatic representatives from allied species now sat. At the center of the chamber, the Trading Council's ancient platforms hovered in their traditional formation, the eldest occupying the highest position. Her cybernetic enhancements, far older than any others present, pulsed with the formal patterns of official deliberation. "The preliminary discussions have concluded," she announced, her voice carrying the metallic timbre of age. "We now move to formal consideration of the status referendum. The options before the Council are threefold: complete independence with a mutual defense treaty, formal alliance with specific security guarantees, or integration as an autonomous trading authority within the United Earth sphere of influence." Telex, seated among the senior directors, noted the enhancement patterns of her colleagues. Despite their carefully maintained official demeanors, their lights revealed the tension underlying the proceedings. This was perhaps the most consequential decision the Grent had faced in centuries. The eldest's ancient eyes surveyed the chamber. "Before we proceed to statements of position, Director Telex has requested the opportunity to address the Council. As the principal architect of our initial Droo engagement and witness to the subsequent conflict, her perspective merits our attention." Rising from her platform, Telex moved to the central speaking position, her enhancement lights shifting to the formal pattern used for official council addresses. "Honored eldest, esteemed council members, allied observers," she began, acknowledging each group with a traditional gesture. "A month ago, our species faced extinction at the hands of a force we ourselves had helped resurrect. Today, we gather in a rebuilt chamber to determine our future course. That we have this opportunity is itself remarkable, a testament not just to our resilience, but to the intervention of those who might have simply allowed us to suffer the consequences of our misjudgment." She activated a holographic display showing the trade corridor before and after the human intervention. The devastation of the Droo attack transformed into renewed infrastructure, more advanced and extensive than before. "We Grent have always prided ourselves on clear-eyed assessment of reality. It is the foundation of profitable trade. And reality now demands we acknowledge certain truths. The galaxy is more dangerous than we believed. Our species lacks the military capability to defend against advanced threats like the Droo. And humanity, long thought to be merely one trading partner among many, possesses capabilities and foresight far beyond what we had assessed." Murmurs passed through the council at this frank admission, but Telex continued undeterred. "I have reviewed all available data on human civilization, their history, their social structures, their treatment of allied species. What emerges is not the profile of a conquering empire, but of a defensive coalition forged through hard experience. They do not seek domination but security. They value not subjugation but cooperation." She gestured to the observation gallery where human representatives sat alongside delegates from a dozen other species. Look at their existing alliances. Each partner species maintains its cultural autonomy, its internal governance, its unique contribution to the collective. None have been absorbed or erased. Moreover, she continued, humanity's approach to the Droo threat reveals much about their character. They could have acted unilaterally but chose to share intelligence, allowing us to make our own decisions. They could have abandoned us to our fate when those decisions led to conflict, but chose to intervene at critical cost to themselves. They could have imposed terms after saving us, but chose instead to offer options and respect our decision. Telex's enhancement lights settled into the pattern of formal recommendation. Based on these facts, and on my direct experience with human representatives before, during, and after the conflict, I advocate for the third option, integration as an autonomous trading authority within the human sphere, not from fear or necessity, but from recognition of optimal mutual benefit. Our species excels at trade, diplomacy, and economic development. Humanity excels at security, technological innovation, and crisis response. Together, we create a synergy that neither could achieve alone, precisely the sort of complementary partnership that has driven the most profitable ventures throughout our history. She concluded with the traditional formula, "For the good of galactic trade, I so recommend." As Telex returned to her platform, the council erupted in discussion, enhancement lights flashing in complex patterns of agreement, objection, and analysis. The debate continued for hours, with various council members presenting alternative perspectives and raising legitimate concerns about sovereignty, cultural preservation, and historical independence. Throughout the proceedings, Telex noted the human representatives remained silent, making no attempt to influence the decision. Their restraint spoke volumes about their respect for Grent autonomy, even when their strategic interests were directly involved. Finally, as the debate reached its natural conclusion, the eldest raised her ancient hands for silence. "We have heard all perspectives and analyzed all data. The time has come for decision." The voting process was swift and efficient, as befit a species evolved for commerce. Each council member's enhancement lights pulsed with their choice, the patterns aggregated in a central display that shifted and flowed as the votes accumulated. When the final tally stabilized, a hush fell over the chamber. The pattern was clear, if not unanimous: 73% in favor of integration as an autonomous authority, 21% preferring formal alliance, and 6% advocating complete independence. "The Council has spoken," the eldest declared. "The Grent Trading Authority will integrate with the United Earth Sphere as an autonomous economic administration, maintaining our cultural traditions and trading practices while accepting the security umbrella and technological partnership offered by humanity." She turned to the human delegation. "We request formal drafting of the integration framework, with specific provisions for commercial autonomy, cultural preservation, and proportional representation in joint governance bodies." Admiral Marshner, who had observed the proceedings in respectful silence, rose and bowed in the traditional Grent manner. "On behalf of United Earth, we accept your decision with honor. The framework will be developed collaboratively with full respect for Grent traditions and expertise. Together, we build a stronger future for all our peoples." As the formal session concluded, Telex found herself approached by both and William Bright, who had observed from different sections of the chamber. "A historic day," noted, his ancient eyes gleaming with approval, "though I suspect not everyone will immediately recognize its wisdom." "Progress rarely comes with unanimous consent," William agreed, "but the foundation is solid. Your speech was compelling, Director Telex. Forthright without being alarmist, pragmatic while acknowledging deeper values." "I simply stated the reality as I understand it," Telex replied. After witnessing the Droo's true nature and humanity's response, the optimal path forward seemed clear. Om's enhancement lights pulsed with the pattern used to acknowledge a student's growth. "You've evolved beyond mere trading calculations to true strategic thinking, young Telex, the mark of a true leader." Speaking of strategic matters, William interjected, his tone shifting to something more official, Admiral Marshner would like to extend an invitation. A joint human-Grent task force is being assembled to coordinate economic recovery throughout sectors affected by the Droo conflict. Given your unique experience and the Council's decision today, you would be an ideal candidate to lead the Grent contingent. Telex's enhancement light cycled through consideration patterns. The trade corridor reconstruction is still ongoing. And proceeding ahead of schedule, pointed out, others can manage the implementation phase. Your talents would be better applied to the broader strategic vision. After a moment's reflection, Telex nodded. I accept, provided the Council approves the assignment. They already have, revealed, his enhancement lights pulsing with subtle amusement. The vote was taken during the preparatory session this morning. Some decisions, it seems, require less deliberation than others. As they parted ways, Telex found herself contemplating the rapid evolution of events. What had begun as a simple trade initiative had transformed not just the Grents' relationship with humanity, but their place in the galactic order. They had moved from independent traders to key partners in a new, more robust coalition of species, one that might finally bring lasting stability to a galaxy long fractured by distrust and conflict. And all because they had chosen to heed a warning delivered through ancient VCR tapes. As head of the Grent contingent in the Joint Recovery Task Force, she had been invited to observe the final strategic briefing before the campaign's conclusion. The ship's main tactical center hummed with activity as officers from a dozen species coordinated their efforts. At the center of the room, a massive holographic display showed the known galaxy, with Droo facilities marked in pulsing red. Most had already been neutralized, their symbols dimmed to indicate successful operations. Director Telex, Admiral Marshner greeted her as she entered. Thank you for joining us. I believe this session will provide valuable context for your economic recovery planning. Admiral, she acknowledged with a respectful inclination, the invitation is appreciated. Understanding the full scope of the conflict will indeed help us prioritize reconstruction efforts. Marshner gestured toward the display. As you can see, we've made substantial progress. Of the 47 major Droo installations identified from captured data, 43 have been neutralized. The remaining 4 are scheduled for coordinated operations within the next 72 hours. Telex's enhancement lights pulsed with inquiry. Neutralize implies various possible outcomes. May I ask about the disposition of any Droo survivors? A subtle tension passed through the room, officers exchanging glances before returning to their duties. A fair question, Marshner acknowledged, and one that reveals the philosophical differences between our species. He led her to a more private briefing alcove where they could speak candidly. The Droo installations were primarily military in nature, he explained, bringing up detailed schematics, production facilities for weapons, ships, and combat-optimized Droo variants. Our operations prioritized complete neutralization of these threats, with minimal risk to our personnel. William Bright joined them, adding, what the Admiral is diplomatically avoiding stating explicitly is that we haven't taken prisoners, Director Telex. The cybernetic Droo fought to the last in every engagement, activating self-destruct protocols rather than surrendering, and the biological specimens we found were military units with hardwired neural pathways for aggression, essentially living weapons. I see, Telex replied, her enhancement light cycling through solemn patterns. So the species will indeed become extinct, as was originally intended a century ago. Not necessarily, Marshner corrected, surprising her. We've recovered extensive genetic records and embryonic samples from several facilities. Unlike the military variants you encountered, these appear to be baseline Droo genetic profiles, unmodified by the cybernetic faction's warrior enhancements. You're preserving them? Telex asked, her enhancement lights flickering with surprise. William nodded. Contained in secure stasis with multiple redundant safeguards. Not for resurrection, but for study and preservation of genetic diversity. Extinction, even of a hostile species, represents a loss to the galaxy's biological heritage. "A more nuanced approach than I expected," Telix admitted. "Humanity has learned from its own history," Marshner explained. "Total eradication creates its own ethical problems, even when seemingly justified by security concerns. We're eliminating the threat without eliminating all possibility of a future redemption. Generations from now, when the galaxy might be prepared to safely integrate a transformed Droo presence." "Much like your own plan for the embryos," William added, "but with considerably more safeguards and a much longer time frame." Before Telix could respond, an alert sounded throughout the tactical center. Officers rushed to their stations as the main display zoomed in on a region beyond the galactic rim. "Priority signal from Strike Group Theta," reported a communications officer. "They've engaged a previously unidentified Droo facility, significant resistance, requesting reinforcements." Marshner moved swiftly back to the command position, his expression hardening as he assessed the tactical feed. "Deploy reserve units from Sectors 3 and 4, full combat authorization, and get me a direct channel to Strike Group Commander." As the tactical center erupted into coordinated activity, William guided Telix to an observation position where they could monitor without interfering. "This wasn't in the briefing," she noted, her enhancement lights pulsing with concern. "No," William agreed grimly. "This appears to be a facility not documented in the data we captured, possibly their final fallback position." The tactical display updated with live feed from the engagement. Human and allied vessels exchanging fire with what appeared to be the largest Droo installation they had yet encountered. Unlike the previous facilities, this one showed signs of being heavily populated, with thousands of life signs detected. "This isn't just a military outpost," Telix observed, her enhanced perception analyzing the data streaming across the displays. "The energy signature patterns suggest residential sections, cultural repositories." "Their actual colony," William confirmed. "Haven," they called it in the communications we intercepted. "The last refuge of the original cybernetic Droo who fled during the war." For several tense hours they watched as the battle unfolded. The Droo fought with desperate intensity, deploying previously unseen weapons and tactics. But the coalition forces responded with overwhelming coordination and firepower, systematically dismantling the colony's defenses. Finally, as the outer defenses collapsed and boarding operations began, a massive energy surge registered throughout the facility. "They've activated their self-destruct protocols," an officer announced. "Quantum cascade reaction building. All vessels advised to withdraw beyond safety perimeter." "Evacuation status of our boarding teams," Marshner demanded. 63% extracted, Admiral. Remaining teams reporting heavy resistance blocking their withdrawal routes." Marshner's face remained impassive as he made the difficult calculation. "Continue extraction efforts until the final safety margin, not 1 second longer." Telix watched as the coalition vessels pulled back from the doomed facility, rescue shuttles racing against time to extract the remaining boarding teams. On the tactical display, the energy readings from Haven continued to climb toward critical levels. "This is their final statement," William said quietly beside her. "Rather than face defeat, they choose annihilation. The same choice they made a century ago when they fled rather than seek terms." Is it choice or programming? Telix wondered. After so many generations of cybernetic enhancement, how much of their original nature remains? How much is simply execution of hardwired protocols? A philosophical question with no clear answer, William acknowledged. But practically speaking, the result is the same. The display flared brilliant white as Haven's self-destruct sequence reached completion. A massive shockwave expanded outward, dissipating harmlessly before reaching the withdrawn coalition fleet. When the sensors cleared, nothing remained of the once mighty Droo colony but scattered debris and fading energy readings. "Final extraction report," called the operations officer. 89% of boarding teams successfully recovered, estimated 47 personnel lost with the facility. Marshner acknowledged the report with a grim nod before addressing the tactical center. "All units stand down from combat alert. Transition to recovery and analysis operations. We'll hold memorial services for our fallen at 800 tomorrow." As the immediate crisis passed and the tactical center settled into post-operation procedures, Marshner approached Telex and William. "Not how I had hoped to conclude this briefing," he said, "but perhaps fitting that you witness the end of the cybernetic Droo. Their story began with your initiative, after all." "A sobering reminder of the consequences of underestimating existential threats," Telex replied, her enhancement lights pulsing with respectful mourning for those lost in the operation. "The Grent will not forget this lesson. Nor will humanity," Marshner assured her, "which is why the preserved genetic samples will remain secured under joint oversight, a reminder of both the potential for resurrection and the danger it represents." As they prepared to depart the tactical center, William held back for a private word with Telex. "There's something you should know," he said, his voice low. "Before the facility's destruction, our teams managed to extract some of their historical archives. Among them was a record of the original decision to establish contact with the Grent." "What did it reveal?" Telex asked, her enhancement lights pulsing with curiosity. "They chose your species deliberately, after extensive observation," William explained. "Not randomly, not opportunistically. They selected the Grent specifically because of your commercial focus, your tendency to see opportunities rather than threats, and your tradition of keeping trading operations independent from governmental oversight." Telex enhancement lights cycled through realization patterns. "We were targeted for our weaknesses." "Your specializations," William corrected. "Every species has blind spots corresponding to their strengths. The Droo were expert at identifying and exploiting them. Humanity's militarism, your commercialism, both have advantages and vulnerabilities. Which is why partnership matters," Telex concluded. "Different perspectives, complementary strengths." "Exactly," William agreed. "Together we covered each other's blind spots. That's the foundation of any successful coalition. Diversity of thought and approach, united by common purpose." As they made their way to the shuttle bay for Telex's return journey, they passed a viewport offering a spectacular view of distant galaxies beyond their own. "What happens now?" Telex asked, pausing to admire the vista. With the Droo threat neutralized and reconstruction underway, William considered the question, his gaze also fixed on the distant stars. "Humanity has spent a century focused on a single existential threat, devoting enormous resources to its containment. With that chapter closed, we can finally turn our attention outward again. To exploration, to discovery, to building rather than simply preserving. New trade routes," Telex noted, her enhancement lights brightening. "New species to meet, new markets to develop." "Exactly," William smiled. "Your expertise will be invaluable in that expansion." The Grent approach to first contact, focusing on mutual benefit rather than potential threat, balances humanity's more cautious instincts. "For the good of galactic trade," Telex recited the traditional Grent motto. "And for something more," William added, echoing what had become their shared refrain, "for a galaxy where different species recognize that their differences are strengths when properly aligned." As Telex boarded her shuttle for the return journey to Unity Station, she reflected on the extraordinary path that had led her from a simple trade initiative to this pivotal moment in galactic history. The Droo were gone, but the partnerships forged in response to their threat remained, stronger now, tested by fire and sacrifice. What had begun as a project to resurrect an extinct species had instead given birth to something perhaps more significant, a new model of interspecies cooperation, where each contributed according to their nature toward a shared vision of prosperity and security. And in that new beginning, Telex found both purpose and hope, the greatest profit of all. Thank you for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. Video shares, memberships, and super thanks help the channel grow as well, so feel free to partner with this channel in that way as we grow. With that all said, thank you again for listening to this story, and thank you for your time. On the left side of your screen are some videos I think you might be interested in. I hope to see you in the next one.